Let's say that. And then we'll sign a couple of Okay.
Fantastic, thank you.
This room's got.
Do I wait to do? Yeah, wait till she's here.
Oh, I might can't. I'm not sure. It's not.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah. Stuff like it looks right next door. You never get your own. I'm not glad I've been looking at West End. Yeah. I've always wanted.
Yeah.
How about George?
Irons. Aren't you really talking? Good morning, everyone. I am Vice Chair Benham. Calling on the board. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Starting, we have some of offices. Exciting. Private can. Partly binder. Lots of family. I, Bonnie Eber, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Connecticut, so long as I continue to be a citizen thereof. And I will faithfully discharge, according to law and to the best of my abilities, the duties of the office of a member of the Connecticut State Department of Education. So help me God. I, Kristen A. Record, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Connecticut, as long as I continue to be a citizen thereof,
and that I will faithfully discharge, according to law and the best of my abilities, the duties of the office of the member of the State Board of Education. So help me God.
Thank you.
That's good.
If I say that, I can be fine. Sure.
Eric Clemens, welcome back, Eric.
I solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Connecticut, so long as I continue to be a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully discharge according to the law and to the best of my ability the law of member of the Connecticut State Board of Education.
I, Salazar, solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States. Laws and duties thereof, that I will be faithful to discharge according to law and to my ability. Member of the United States of the United States.
Congratulations and welcome back. I'm so glad to have them back here. And it's always great to have new additions to our board, Ms. Record and Dr. Salazar. Ms. Record, could you just take a few moments and tell us a little bit about yourselves? Eric and Bonnie worked with.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen Record. I teach physics at Bennell High School in Stratford, Connecticut. I'll be completing my 24th year in June. I am also the 2011 Connecticut State Teacher of the Year, and last year I was inducted into the National Teachers Hall of Fame. I have taught every level of physics in my high school, from physical science all the way up through calculus-based physics. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm wonderful to meet everyone, and I'm excited to be here.
We're excited you're here getting back.
Thank you.
Dr. Salazar.
Good morning, everyone. Truly exciting to be a member of the board for the invitation. I have several hats. It's one of them. I'll obviously paying a lot of attention to it. We'll just put this very yeah. I am a pediatrician trained in pediatric infectious diseases. I am currently the physician in chief of Children's Hospital here in Hartford. I'm also a professor and chair of the Department of Pediatrics at I'm devoted to education at the graduate education level. I've trained many fellows, residents, students, medical students, and junior faculty to move on in careers in healthcare. Journey for me. I'm going to learn a lot from all of you, and I'm really looking forward to participating and providing whatever expertise I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I won't ask all the other board members to speak, but over lunch, maybe we can connect more, and over the next couple of months, certainly we'll get to know all of us, but welcome. Yes, I believe you have to press the button to speak. That's it. Okay, we're going to move to public participation. We have
list right this morning, so I am going to remind you to try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. I think I got signal when you're getting close. Our first person is Commissioner Beth Bye.
Good morning. It's so nice to be here with Board of Education members and welcome to the new members. And Bonnie, how wonderful, lady.
Great to see you, madam.
I'm going to, we have formal comments from the office from Deborah Adams, who works in the higher education part of our office, and you will have those in front of you. I was going to add flavor. I'm here to speak in support of the University of St. Joseph Child Study major with a concentration in inclusive early childhood education, a pathway at the University of St. Joseph. Things are changing a lot, as I'm sure you're all aware, and many of you served on the committee on certification and the preschool, the third grade special education is still in place, that certification, but that is going to change to a pre-K to 6 certification, which will no longer have a special education requirement. So what St. Joseph, the University of St. Joseph is doing is really a visionary, they're 3 years ahead of the curve because the plan is for pre-K to 6 certification to come in. And at the same time as we're losing that special education requirement, is that it's adopted, which I believe it will be. We have more children enrolled in IDEA Part B and C than we have in the past. And at the same time, we have extensive outreach efforts to get the hard-to-reach children who don't ever make it into that system. So we expect it to grow even more. So this program is perfectly timed. And superintendents who might be listening, I'm sure will back me up to say these students will be in high demand because IDEA Part B requires special education in the public schools for 3 and 4-year-olds. Some of this idea for the program came out of some OEC ARPA investments in lab schools. We are very big believers in the value of lab school on campuses. And the University of St. Joseph has both the Jangris Center and the School for Young Children on site where, teachers and training are getting that incredible support of highly qualified teachers who have a lot of experience training our future teachers. So I think this is so well timed, and I just wanted to lend my support to the program and look forward to continued collaboration because, as we know, education starts at birth and it never ends, but that connection to early childhood is critical. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lindsay Berndola.
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair, Commissioner, members of the State Board. I'm Richard J. Paterla. I'm a lawyer with the law firm of Birch and Moses, and we represent the Waterbury Board of Education and the Hagen Board of Education. Both parties to the declaratory ruling proceeding that you have before you and on your agenda today. Our time is short and there's so much to say, so I'm going to focus on the core of the dispute. Connecticut General Statute Section 10-66 EED7. This section directs a school district to pay the difference between the quote reasonable cost, quote, educating a special education student and the sum of the amount received by the state charter school for such student. The word is reasonable in the statute, not actual cost incurred. The draft declaratory ruling is inviting the state board to rewrite a state statute to substitute the word actual for reasonable. This proposed ruling is based upon pages of statutory construction designed to ignore the plain language of the statute, which includes the word specifically reasonable. Reasonable implies an objective standard. The per pupil cost formula used by the Waterbury Board of Education is an attempt to inject an objective factor into the determination of reasonable costs is the exact opposite of subjective, which is what is said in the declaratory ruling draft. On behalf of my clients, we ask this board to not blindly accept this invitation to further burden financially challenged public schools in favor of the state charter school. The proposed ruling gives the charter school the unilateral right to incur any cost to provide services without regard to a reasonable cost limitation. That is not what the legislature intended. Make no mistake, a vote for the proposed declaratory ruling will hurt public schools across the state. It is an invitation to rewrite a state statute. Substituting actual or reasonable will have a profound effect on the public school district. We respectfully ask you on behalf of our clients to reject the proposed declaratory ruling. The power to rewrite a state statute lies with the Connecticut General Assembly. If it intended to use the word actual, it would. It did not. There should be some level of reasonable cost containment in terms of the provision of services. A public school district is already burdened. As you all know, these are challenging times. So we would ask you again respectfully to decline the invitation to rewrite this statute. Thank you.
Thank you. Irving Bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Honorable State Board of Education members, Commissioner Dr. Russell Tucker. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Doreen Beal. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Waterbury Public Schools. I would like to express my appreciation to be able to address the board today on the topic of charter school reimbursement for special education services from local school districts. Waterbury Public Schools realizes its responsibility to provide its local charter school, in this case, Brass City Charter School, costs associated for transportation and reasonable special education services. Waterbury Public Schools in past years has been severely underfunded, which caused financial hardship to support quality education to the students in Waterbury. This underfunding did not impede our obligation to support a student's special education needs cost at Brass City Charter. Waterbury, in good faith, has calculated what we believe is a fair assessment of that financial obligation to Brass City Charter School. It is with great respect that Waterbury comprehends the request that Brass City Charter is making for financial relief. However, a financial relief for one entity may cause a hardship for another. Waterbury Public Schools does not receive a full reimbursement for our students' special education costs as is being asked by the Brass City Charter School. Special education as a whole is not fully funded, and yet we are expected to fund a fraction of students with more marginal needs at 100%, when the vast majority of students with more acute needs gets only a fraction of that support. There is an inequity in the current process of special education costs that local charter schools can expect to be fully reimbursed for their actual costs as compared to local districts who don't receive a full reimbursement. I respectfully appreciate your time and your consideration today, and that your ruling takes into account the already financial difficulties that a large district endures. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Schwartz.
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair, State Board of Education members, Commissioner Dr. Russell Tucker, Deputy Student Representative. My name is Darren Schwartz. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Waterbury Public Schools. I appreciate the opportunity to address the topic of fairness regarding local municipality reimbursement to charter schools for special education students' needs. As stated in the declaratory ruling, the issue is centered on how we define reasonable cost for services. Waterbury Public Schools, like many others, face the challenge of providing quality education without the freedom to define necessary costs and request full funding from the state. For instance, the financial strain on our district to meet the reimbursement threshold for special education students and the excess cost grant is 4.5 times the per pupil cost, amounting to approximately $82,500. Only after we spend that substantial amount do we even receive a partial reimbursement of about 73%. In plain terms, if the actual cost of servicing a student in Waterbury is $100,000, Waterbury is reimbursed $12,700. Taking into account all of their funding sources, including ECS, that is neither reasonable nor actual. So why should a charter school be able to determine the actual cost and receive 100% reimbursement, starting with the first dollar, when no other public school in the state has that luxury? Charter school special education students identified through the PPT process are not of more value than those identified in the public schools. Waterbury Public Schools is constantly allocating resources, providing students with services as stated in their IEPs, and due to limited funding, must make strategic and financial decisions that impact the entire system to fulfill this important obligation. In the current system proposed, charter schools would not be faced with the same system. Reimbursing public school districts with the current excess cost formula while allowing charter schools to receive actual cost simply values our public school students less than our charter school students. All children in Connecticut deserve a high quality education and a funding system that promotes equity. It's no secret that special education funding is a statewide issue. However, the proposed approach of forcing districts to financially support charter schools with an already unfair system is not the solution. Instead of exacerbating the disparities between charter schools and local districts, we should be focusing on correcting the funding issue at a statewide level for all districts and schools. I urge the board to consider deferring this decision until we can have a more comprehensive discussion that takes a holistic approach to special education funding. By working together to find a more equitable solution, we can avoid perpetuating a system of have and have nots. I have no doubt that everyone in the room values all children, regardless if they are a public school student or a charter school student, a regular ed student, or a special education student. I respectfully request the board take these points into consideration and table this item to allow for further dialogue. Thank you for your time.
Wendy Johns.
Morning. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, honorable members of the State Board. My name is Wendy Johns, and I'm the Director of People Services for Waterbury Public Schools. Today, I will be speaking on the following issue that you are discussing today. Does the actual cost of providing special education and related services include the percentage of time school personnel spend on administrative and planning activities directly related to the provision of special education and related services, in addition to the time spent on direct instruction? In the petition for declaratory ruling dated May 26, 2023, Brazos City Charter School is seeking actual costs which exceed the parameters of the allowance of the IDA grant. Funds may be used for all allowable purposes under IDA Part B and must be necessary and reasonable. Brazos City Charter School has made the following claim. The actual costs of providing special education and related services should include the time school personnel spend on administrative and planning activities directly related to the provision of special education and related services, in addition to the time spent on direct instruction. This stance goes above and beyond what the IDA award allows. In addition, Brazos City has chosen to hire a part-time special education coordinator who spends, quote, 100% of time on responsibilities related to providing special education and related services. This is inaccurate because a part-time special education coordinator services would never be reflected in a student's IEP as a direct, indirect, and/or related service. On page 12 of Brazos City's petition, the part-time special education coordinator's roles and responsibilities were outlined. The funds provided by Waterbury Public Schools should not be used to benefit the school by removing responsibilities from the principal or teachers at that school to run PPT meetings. The reasonable funds provided, not actual, to be used to support the special education supports and services as outlined solely in a student's IEP. Waterbury Public Schools special education teachers, under their current contract, case manage, write IEP goals, provide direct services, contact families, deliver specialized instruction, facilitate PPT meetings, schedule PPT meetings, and finalize all paperwork in CTSED, which is Connecticut's online IEP management platform, for up to 30 students. Teachers currently in Brass City are not expected to complete these tasks. The part-time special education coordinator currently does not finalize IEPs in CTSED. It is only with the assistance of our district office staff that Brass City's IEPs documents maintain compliance. At this time, we are asking respectfully that you please consider charter schools, the provision of special education services be reasonable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dr. Robbins?
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair, members of the State Board Commission, Commissioner Russell Tucker. My name is Verna Ruffin. I'm the superintendent of Waterbury Public Schools, and I am here this morning to speak on behalf of all of my students in Waterbury Public Schools, and I do represent the Board of Education. It is extremely important that you know that we recognize partnerships that may be created across the state of Connecticut for support of all children through a variety of teaching and instructional models, including charter schools. But at no time should we neglect the responsibility of our public schools to educate a large number of students throughout the state of Connecticut and certainly in the city of Waterbury. As you know, the city of Waterbury has been for many, many, many years, probably the city that is underfunded more than any other city or public school system in the state of Connecticut. We do, however, provide services to all of our children, and we do so in an equitable manner for all of our students, and we do so with quite a bit of challenges. I ask you to please consider the fact that if you approve this ruling this morning or at any time, that you are in fact creating an inequitable system that would provide more for charter schools than a public school system can provide for its very own students. I do believe students should receive the absolute best, but they should not receive the absolute best at the neglect of another specialized group of students. Our special education students in Waterbury Public Schools receive the benefit of having excellent teachers, and their instruction is guided by the IEP. We provide that to the very best of our ability. Having to provide more services to a charter school simply because they have included it in their plans and expect Waterbury Public Schools to provide 100% of their funding is a truly inequitable system. I ask you to consider that as you make your final decision and support the fact that school systems were never meant to neglect public systems, and they were never meant to neglect the most vulnerable group of students that we serve in our public schools. Thank you for your consideration this morning.
Greetings, Board of Education members. My name is Deborah Adams, and I am an education consultant with the Office of Early Childhood, where my primary responsibilities are on workforce development. Previous to my position at the Office of Early Childhood, I worked for the State Department of Education, and see lots of my colleagues here today. It's like old home day. There I worked on preschool program management, and more specifically, I supported the certification office around early childhood higher education preparation program review. So I mention this because after review of materials, the Office of Early Childhood is supportive of the undergraduate program in child studies with a concentration in inclusive early childhood education pathway at the University of St. Joe. Their application focuses on the appropriate standards most notably the National Association for the Education of Early Childhood and the Council for Exceptional Children. We feel this new plan program will pair nicely with their current graduate program and provide students with a seamless pathway from undergraduate to graduate studies with an in-depth focus on early childhood. And as I sit here and listen to the testimony prior to mine regarding special education, I think it's more important than ever to really consider higher education preparation programs that are looking at an inclusive, integrated type of an approach and a pathway to prepare students in their life skills and preparation for meeting the needs of children with special needs. The Office of Early Childhood recognizes that the legislature is currently reviewing a proposal to extend the elementary endorsement to include preschool and kindergarten. While this may be advantageous to employment movement within public schools, it may also dilute the depth and breadth of knowledge and skills needed to address the needs of our young learners at a time when their development is most critical. The University of St. Joseph's proposed new program has its foundation in child studies. This will provide candidates with a focus on development, observation, and data collection to better understand behaviors and strategies to support growth and development. Therefore, the Office of Early Childhood is in full support of the University of St. Joseph and their focus on child studies with an integrated special education concentration to prepare candidates that can address our youngest learners and their every need as they prepare for life and school success. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Christine Restock.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Christine Redstock, the Executive Director of Media and Communications for LGBTS United. My concerns is the Title IX changes. I happen to be eligible to compete in women's sports by the United States Bowling Congress because that's the testosterone suppression level guidelines provided by a medical professional. Should I ever return to competition, I will not compete in a elite level women's event because it's not my place as a transsexual woman to do so. When I looked at the CIAC's eligibility for trans girls, there is no testosterone suppression rule. It simply states you can play your sport on your gender identity. That is not ensuring fairness for girls. So last year, my first proposal I sent to Glenn Lungarini, the executive director of the CIAC, was ignored. I sent a follow-up proposal on February 26th, asking for a proposal for trans girls to be eligible in girls' high school sports here, to show a letter from a medical professional showing a testosterone level of 144 nanograms per deciliter for a period of 48 months. That was ignored until I ran into him at the Legislative Office Building in March. After a short conversation, he conveyed to me that there'd be no further discussion on the matter. I'm asking the State Board of Education members to revisit this and push for this to be our policy in the CIAC sports. This will ensure fairness for girls and prepare our trans girls for life when they become trans women as adults and when they compete in women's sports as they grow in their organizations. Trans girls are trans girls, girls are girls, women are women, trans women are trans women, contrary to our state law. So we need to keep things fair. Thank you and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Elizabeth Speed.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Stead, and I am the Education Issues Specialist with Connecticut Education Association. Prior to joining CEA staff a year and a half ago, I was a kindergarten teacher and instructional coach in New London Public Schools for 28 years. I'm here to speak today in support of the University of St. Joseph's request to add the integrated early childhood / elementary education, nursery through third, and special education, nursery through kindergarten 113 certification to their undergraduate program, in addition to their graduate program of study. This program of study will enable more undergraduate students to be better prepared to enter the early childhood classrooms and in turn help with our shortage of early childhood teachers. It's crucial to offer undergraduate students the opportunity to become integrated early childhood certified for several reasons. Firstly, early childhood education sets the foundation for a child's future academic and social emotional development. By engaging undergraduates in this certification process, we ensure that they are equipped with the necessary skills and knowledge to support young learners during these formative years. Secondly, providing undergraduates with integrated early childhood certification enhances the quality of early childhood education programs. Qualified educators can create enriching environments that foster curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking in young children, promoting lifelong learning. In essence, integrating early childhood certification into undergraduate programs not only benefits the individual students by expanding their career opportunities, but also contributes to the well-being and success of future generations. I encourage you to approve this program of study at the undergraduate level at the University of St. Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Bill?
Good morning, Tom Stringfellow, Manchester, Connecticut. I'm as a guest, like I said, one of the non-educators, in the audience, but it doesn't really matter. I think we all can contribute to education in different ways. Just want to congratulate the members of the Board of Ed and wish them good luck in their year, and as well as the two students that are going on to college. I'm your student representative in the fall, so they've done very well as representatives. I always like their recommendations. I just want to start with a little bit of history. I know it's been in the news because of DEI and the pushback, but in yesterday's USA Today, they did talk about the Sean Miller from Northern Virginia High School, talked about many need conversations as a narrative, not as conversation, but not as a narrative when it comes to Black AP studies. I know it was a friction 2 years ago in the state of Florida, but I think everyone's history is important, number one, no matter if you're European or non-European, we've all contributed to this country. And I think the pushback is because it's some pleasant parts of the history that critics don't want to talk about. I really don't care. I probably was descendants of slaves, but my family achieved. My father was in the segregated army during World War II, and he served in the European theater. And my brother and I had both gone into college, so I was lucky I didn't have to live through the civil rights movement, which brings me back to the assassination of Robert Kennedy. It'll be 56 years since his assassination, June 6th, as well as DA World War II in 1944. My father took part in that as quartermaster. And we have a good nation here in Connecticut. Three mothers, I want to recommend this book that came out by Anna Malika Tubbs. Last year, she talked about the mothers of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. It's a very good book. And National Geographic History just came out in spring edition about dealing with the Buddha, going back 2,400 years ago, and how it affected Asia, as well as King Kamehameha from Hawaii that united Hawaii in 1810 until it became a possession in 1893, illegally taken over. Education is very important. I'm glad that NPR has done what they can on radio a few weeks ago about gun safety and other issues in the TV. And glad the Secretary of Education, Cardona, came 2 weeks ago to talk to students that may have gotten into trouble with the law. He went to a correctional facility in Newtown, Connecticut. But it's also, I'm going to mention this special education. I think it's important not to look down on those students to get the proper funding from the feds, but also watch out for terms like psycho, crazy, freak, spaz, retard, that you're not supposed to use today because they're persons with unique disabilities, whether they can't see or walk, but that's what's inside. So I think we're on the cusp of hopefully change in the world. Right now, it's getting kind of hopefully with this pushback and ideas. So I think we got against anti-Semitism, racism, sexism, and also just listen to each other. No matter what political stripes. I think we're at a crossroads right now, and
my 50th year anniversary coming out of high school this year, so in June. So I do remember voting in 1976 in the car for Jimmy Carter. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany Jackson.
Good morning, Vice Chairwoman Benham, Honorable State Board of Education members and Commissioner Dr. Lovell Tucker. My name is Tiffany Jackson. I'm the Executive Director of Student Services Special Education for New Haven Public Schools. I am here today with respect to the discussion around charter school funding, and I'm urging the State Board to not adopt this proposed declaratory ruling because such a decision would further worsen the inequity that exists between large urban school districts like New Haven and charter schools. If you think that a statute which clearly provides for reimbursements for reasonable cost does not actually mean reasonable, then let me ask you, what is reasonable about this situation? Is it reasonable that large school districts are struggling to maintain appropriate staffing levels amidst a national shortage in teachers and special education service providers in order to meet their growing needs and student population? Yet the reality is that our financial and resource constraints require each of our district teachers to manage at least 20 to 30 students in their classrooms, as opposed to some charter schools demanding more funds for their teachers who are only managing 10 students per room. Is it reasonable that New Haven would have to divert funds away from hiring necessary service providers like psychologists or speech and language pathologists who would be serving hundreds of kids in our district in order to reimburse charter schools for large costs, and that they say were spent on special education for a few students? Is it reasonable that New Haven Public Schools are bending over backwards to justify and document why we need every single cent of our federal and state dollars, while charter schools are demanding more money from us without sufficient explanation as to why? But when we ask a charter school for more explanation as to why they are demanding more money, we get stonewalled. There's no transparency about how they're choosing to spend their money to serve students with special needs. There are times when I know that a charter school has not been able to provide a certain kind of teacher or service provider, yet they provide invoices to be paid for those services anyway. Is it reasonable that ultimately our large urban school districts ultimately bear the responsibility to handle subsequent state complaints that or any other litigation that stems from students attending charter schools? Yet often charter schools realize too late that they cannot appropriately support certain students with special education needs, and we are left to pick up the pieces. We have to figure out, without adequate documentation from charter schools, how the student was not appropriately supported and help the student transition back into districts. What is not reasonable is taking money from large urban underserved school districts and giving it with no questions asked to charter schools who are not providing justification for their alleged costs. We all have a collective obligation to provide an equitable and appropriate education for our students. We respectfully request that you help hold charter schools accountable for their expenses and please make a reasonable decision. Thank you for your time. Here, Barbara Regier.
Madam President, Commissioner, and members of the Board of Education, I'm Barbara Ruggiero. I'm the Executive Director of Veracity Charter School in Waterbury, Connecticut. For those, just a little background, BCCS is Waterbury's only charter school, and we opened in 2013, I'm sorry, and grew out to a full pre-K through 12 aid school over the last several years. All our students are students from Waterbury. They are all Waterbury residents and belong ultimately to the district. We are a public school. Every child that we serve has been chosen in a blind lottery. To date, we have between our K and 8th grade, approximately 20% of our children who have IEPs. And we are responsible for providing services for those students
That includes what we do at this point is we hire our own special ed teachers whose job solely is providing direct service to those students. We also hire our own para educators to work for children, if that's indicated by their IEPs. Our IEPs are approved by the city, that they participate in them, or should be. It's been spotty over the last several years, I think, due to shortages of professional people, STEM people. But the sole job of our special education teachers and our parents is direct service. They don't do anything else in the school. They're not going out to recess. They're not doing lunch duty. They're doing nothing but servicing our students. We do have a coordinator, and she runs the PPTs. She notifies parents. She also does the educational testing, as indicated, through PPTs. And we've settled on that model because it frees up our teachers to provide. There's never time where they're assessing or testing and taking away from our students. So that's the point of that. We do not charge for any true administrative cost. For instance, attend all PPTs. We have never done any billing for those sorts of things. So there's many administrative costs that we just absorb. So what we bill the city for is the direct salary, the actual salary of the special education teacher and the parents. Over the last years, we have been in about 5 years, we've been in dispute with the city. The reimbursement that we've received, when we have received any, has been about in the vicinity of about $34,000 a year, which in no way covers the salaries of these teachers. We can only pay for the services that we're being reimbursed for by the district reimbursing us for those services. $30,000 for 20% with 20% of our population as special education students in no way is a reasonable reimbursement for the services that we offer. To date, we accumulate, in terms of those salaries, the city, we believe, owes us approximately $1.4 million, which is an incredible, sizable number for a school with a budget of around $6 million. The lack of reimbursement directly impacts our whole overall educational program for all our students, because it's become such a drain, generally speaking, for the school. So I ask you to support the declaratory statement that you'll consider today. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady Wright?
Morning, Commissioner Russell Tucker and Vice Chair Benham and State Board of Education members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Katie Roy, and I'm an attorney with the firm Nonprofits Council. I represent the petitioners Brass City Charter School and Booker T. Washington Academy and the petition for a declaratory ruling that is before you today. The petitioners urge this body to adopt this ruling. Students with disabilities have the right under both federal and Connecticut law to attend any public school and to receive the special education services enumerated in their IEPs, no matter what type of public school they attend. In fact, this document, which is created in collaboration with the resident district, is precisely what determines what is a reasonable service for each special education student who attends a charter school. Charter schools are obligated to provide the services enumerated in those IEPs under state and federal law. Petitioners recognize and are sympathetic to the many financial burdens that are placed on local public school districts. However, the fact that Connecticut's legislature has not chosen to reimburse local public school districts for 100% of special education services does not change the undisputed fact that resident districts are responsible for providing the cost of providing special education services to their resident students, no matter what Connecticut public school they attend. For years, resident districts, including Waterbury and New Haven Public Schools, have systematically refused to reimburse charter schools for the reasonable cost of providing special education services, arguing that the statute as written allows them to subjectively determine what they believe to be a reasonable special education cost without taking into account the actual requirements and costs of providing students who attend those schools with the services that are enumerated in their IEPs. Because the petitioning charter schools have no other access to funding, including no access to a local property tax base, to pay for special education costs, it prevents them from having the funding necessary to provide the special education services that these students are entitled to under the law. The petitioners have been unable to resolve these disputes with the resident districts for years, despite direct outreach to the districts, despite attempts to negotiate with the districts through council and through mediation by this department. This is why the petitioners have sought an official declaratory ruling from this body. This ruling goes to the heart of providing all Connecticut students with disabilities with access to the educational opportunities that they are entitled to receive under the law. Therefore, the petitioners strongly urge the Connecticut State Board of Education to adopt this declaratory ruling. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob Werlo.
Morning, I'm Jacob Werblow, professor at CCSU, and I spoke to you last month. I'm here again, speaking on behalf of myself, not for the university, but as an educational scholar. I hope I have something that's worth listening to. So I'm here this morning. 4 of my students are here in the audience as well, but it's a little nerve-wracking to come up, so I'm coming up on behalf of them. So first, I'd like to just mention to you the first priority of our board, which is right on the agenda, which says ensuring equitable access to education. Now, I didn't write that. Maybe you didn't write that, but someone did. And that's the first priority. So of course, that's something that we're striving for. So my question is, my 4 students who are here this morning, most of them are working. One is working 3 jobs. They're doing everything they can just to get through college so they can become a public school teacher. And that's a wonderful thing. And they have come here tonight or this morning to be a part of this. So if we think about the EdTPA, what is equitable about that? What is equitable about continuing to require an assessment that no other state in this country requires for certification, with the exception of 2 other states? So we're one of 3 in the entire country. Now, if we go back 10 years, TPA was very popular. Most of the states in our nation required it for certification. That's no longer the case. So this ship is sinking. And why, Connecticut, are we still sailing a ship that is going to sink? So the EdTPA is, if you do not have, you have the power to make the change. I do not, my students do not, but the choice is yours. And the requirement came from this room. It came from the Board of Education in 2016. And so one thing you could do, which again costs no money, you could remove the requirement. It's actually in a bill, House Bill 363, which is in appropriations. Hopefully it can get through that. But House Bill 363 has language in the bill regarding this issue. You could repeal the mandate or the requirement for EdTPA, and you could make the university teacher education programs a little bit more enjoyable. And you could save my students $300, and that would be nice. And you could do that. And if you don't do that, then you are taking $300 from them, because that is currently what all students have to do when they are during student teaching, their final semester, before they go into our public schools. So please look at this issue. I have a petition which I will share with you. And I also spoke last month about school lunch. After my public comment, the superintendent of New London came up and introduced herself. She invited us to come to New London, and my students and I are going to New London on Friday morning. We're going to be having lunch at the Nathan Hale Magnet School, and I would love for a few of you to come and join us. And I guarantee it will be the best school lunch you've ever had, and that should be the model for Connecticut. So we can be visionaries. We can make a real difference, and I need you to help us, because if there's no one else above you except the sky. So thank you so much, and I hope my words were helpful.
Thank you. That concludes our public participation for today. There's no need for executive session. And I would like to move for our guests that are in the room, move items regarding action, item number 7. Contain a motion for the consideration of the ruling of the Grass City Charter School.
Good morning, everyone. As you know, my name is Mike McKeon. I'm the Director of Legal and Governmental Affairs for the State Department of Education. With me this morning is Attorney Louis Disco, who is also a member of the legal office for the State Department of Education. Lou and I collaborated on this process, beginning with the original filing of the petition for declaratory ruling. The board may recall, originally there were 5 issues on which Grass City sought a ruling. At September 6, 2023 meeting, this board, upon the recommendation of the State Department of Education, agreed to issue rulings on 2 of them. And that is what is before this board today. We have heard presentations during public comment with respect to these proposed rulings. They have focused on finances, which is obviously a concern for any educational entity, and also many references to charter schools. What we really have not heard are references to students and to the education of those students, the education of students with disabilities, perhaps the most vulnerable students within Connecticut's public school ecosystem. Section 10-66 EE subsection D subsection 7 is the focus of the declaratory ruling. And that provides that local and regional school districts whose special education students are attending charter schools, that the districts will create individualized education program, IEPs, which are required by law and which set forth what educational services these students are to receive. The IEP is not an open door. It expressly delineate these are the services that this student needs to make a reasonable educational progress. This is required under both federal law and under state law and a slew of federal case law. Charter schools are then charged by statute with providing these services. Charter school, again, is not permitted to say, okay, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. The charter school is governed by the IEP. Services set forth in the IEP are inherently reasonable. Reasonable under Connecticut case law is an objective term, and that objectivity is found in the 4 corners of the IEP. There's no guesswork. There's no mystery. There is what is in the IEP. Charter schools are required to implement those services, and they're entitled to be reimbursed for those services. Now, heard in public comment that, well, reasonable is different from actual. Actually, it's not. As I don't know if you all had the opportunity to fully read the declaratory ruling. I know it's pretty long, but reasonable the language of statute is not necessarily on its face plain and ambiguous. Rather, Connecticut's appellate courts have set forth a process by which one has to determine, does it make sense? How does it comport with other statutes? And in that respect, it is very, very clear that in the context of providing services demanded, required, under law for a student with a disability, that the actual costs are the reasonable costs. Think of another one. You would say, well, sure, the IEP, we, the district, have said, this is the IEP, this is what this student needs. But we don't think it's reasonable. That's inherently contradictory. And this district takes a position that the charter school charged by state law with implementing the reasonable educational services that have been determined by the sending districts, so not the sending districts, but the resident districts. Districts say they're not entitled to those costs, reimbursement of those costs. Essentially, what the districts would like this board to do is to interpret 10-66 EE subsection D subsection 7 in a way that would be totally and clearly at odds with federal law, which requires that each student who has been deemed eligible for special education services is entitled to receive those individualized services that are provided under the student's IEP. Now, I represented school boards for many years. And actually, the main thrust of my practice for many of those years was special education. So I'm no stranger to how this works. No stranger to the law. I have been in federal courts. I've been in front of hearing officers appointed by this department in special education litigation. If the district has a student who requires special ed services, and that student is attending the public school, the district can't say, well, you know what, we're not going to provide such and such services because it's going to cost us too much. Furthermore, there are students whose disabilities are so profound that the least restrictive environment in which they can receive an education is an out-of-district therapeutic program or other approved private special education programs. Districts cannot say, okay, we're not going to put you there because you require it, but it costs too much, or they are not allowed under law, put the child there and say, well, we're not going to pay you full freight because we don't think it's reasonable. We are going to determine what you should charge. And yet, in opposing this proposed declaratory ruling, the districts are saying, yeah, well, kids in charter schools, you know what, they're only entitled to this arbitrary, artificial figure that we've come up with. And we unilaterally have come up with the very definition of subjective, not the objective calculus that is required in the Connecticut case law. So they talk about inequity for students within the district when actually, in opposing this declaratory ruling, they are endorsing inequity for students, their own students from their districts. They're proposing inequity for those students who are going to charter schools. That's not permissible under federal law. That is not permissible under state law. And frankly, it's morally unacceptable as well. All students are entitled to education. Special education students are, special education law is perhaps the most heavily regulated law there is with respect to education. And as I said, the law is extremely clear that students who are receiving special education, they are entitled to make meaningful educational progress. And that meaningful educational progress is delineated in their IEP. And it is inconsistent to say, we have determined this is what these students need. But the cost of it, we're not required to pay. They do not do that for students with their own district. They cannot do that for students who are in charter school. The law as set forth in the proposed declaratory ruling is very clear on those points. This is about student education. This is about equity for all students. This is about districts treating their own students and students of theirs whose parents have placed them in charter schools the same. The law provides that if districts think the costs are not reasonable, which frankly don't have that right, because again, that's a subjective determination that's at odds with federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, and as well as its corresponding state law. But they have the ability, pursuant to state law, to provide the services themselves. They say, well, we don't think we want to reimburse you for the cost of your special education teacher, so we are going to provide the special education. Furthermore, Section 10-76G of the Connecticut General Statutes provide that school districts that incur more than 4.5 times a per pupil expenditure for special education placement, and if you're placing a child out of district, or if you have a child with, let's say, one-to-one paraprofessional support within the district, it can exceed the 4.5 times per pupil cost. Under state law, they're entitled to an excess cost reimbursement. This is also true for the student, in this case, New Haven and Waterbury, that are in charter schools. Not as if, wow, that's really expensive for those students, and we're getting nothing back. They are also susceptible to the excess cost reimbursement laws. So these students, they're students in these schools, they are to be treated equally. Do not treat certain students differently than others. If you think that, well, they have a smaller teacher-student ratio. As noted as declaratory ruling, charter schools don't have a say over the lottery process. They can't say, I tell you what, this year we're only going to take 5 special ed students. Not this year, we're not going to take any special ed students. We're maxed out. They don't have that right. It would be violation of federal law as well as state law. But once those students are there, they are entitled to an education, just as if they had stayed in the resident district. And they are entitled to receive that. Not just entitled, they are legally entitled to that education regardless of cost. And as noted in the proposed declaratory ruling and the legal analysis, there are protections in place with respect to excess cost reimbursement, with respect to districts providing the services themselves. Finally, as to the second issue, with respect to non-instructional time, at page 24 of the proposed declaratory ruling, there are citations to multiple federal regulations which set forth administrative tasks that are required to support special ed students. Direct instruction does not occur in a vacuum. Even with non-disabled students, there are prep periods for a reason in schools. That might not be a great analogy, but the idea is the same. Direct instruction does not happen in a vacuum. There has to be data collection. There has to be charting. There has to be the legally required administration of assessment to determine if the child's making progress on their annual goals and objectives set forth in the IEP, and to determine, help inform when the next annual IEP is drafted. Has the child made progress? Has the child made limited progress? Has the child mastered the goals and objectives? If the district is providing these services and the charters are not, the charters cannot charge for it. They can only charge for what they do. If you have a fully salaried special education teacher, which we heard from the director of Brass City, part and parcel of their duties is to perform these administrative tasks. So that would be subsumed into their salary, just like the direct instruction time is subsumed into their salary. But if you, for some reason, have hourly, someone who's being employed on an hourly basis or what have you, and part of the hours incurred is the provision of assessments, the collection of data, the attendance at PPT meetings, all of which are required by law, then that is reimbursable because it is inextricably entwined with provision of free, appropriate public education and is required under law. So for these reasons and for the reasons set forth by Tedisco and me within the declaratory ruling, the State Department of Education strongly recommends to this board that it adopt, approve, and issue the declaratory ruling as proposed. Thank you.
Questions?
Speaking into the mic correctly. I have a historical problem with it. Thank you.
You need to move it in front of your voice.
I promise. Thank you. Get into all of it. I just have a few questions. So I understand sort of what this declaration of ruling actually says. Well, so first off, let me just say that I'm sure that I certainly agree that we have a more legal obligation to provide professional education services to every student in the state. At the same time, I think there are some distinctions that I'm just not sort of clear about yet. One is like there's sort of a distinction between whether the reinforcements were actually provided by our schools. It's not really an issue today exactly so much as the question of what the standard should be. Should we be replacing sort of a reasonable cost standard with the actual cost standard, right? And then there's a question of, okay, there's a distinction between whether the services provided are reasonable versus whether the costs of those services are reasonable. And one of those things is determined for PPT and one of those not. I think those are distinctions that are important for me to keep in mind. And they may diverge, I guess, for a couple of reasons, right? And stop you wrong, but the things that came up in the briefing, or there are sort of three reasons that costs of a charter school providing a special education service might diverge from those of a district. One is just scale. The district is, services to many special education students, and may be able to do so at equal quality for price. Another is sort of just agency issues, we're worried about incentives of reimbursement, that if I bill services to you, that may affect how I use those services, right? Tied to healthcare settings, additional education settings. And then the third is just this question of differential reimbursement, and that's sort of a factual question that I'll leave to about that system that I do. I guess my question is just how do we think about the way the districts can effectively navigate this setting in a context? When is the case that the costs of providing these services diverge for whatever reason between the district and the charter, right? So in the brief, and your testimony here sort of emphasize that there's this PPT meeting that gives the district a chance to speak in this question about what services are necessary. I guess my question for you, and this is I'm truly curious about the answer, is given the legal mandate of IDEA and other relevant state laws, I guess, how much flexibility? I imagine that oftentimes the services are dictated by the.
Yes. There's a series of federal regulations with respect to assessments. There have to be certain assessments within certain periods of time. There's a requirement that students be assessed in all areas of suspected disability. That teacher observation, record review, these all combine to inform the PPT as to whether, number one, whether the student has a identifiable disability under the IDEA, and two, as a result of that, what educational programming and related services does the student need. And that determination, as noted in the brief, is also considered in conjunction for where it's going to be provided. In other words, these services are going to be provided in a regular classroom, in a resource room, in a one-to-one setting, in a homebound setting, and in a district setting. And it actually 10-66 EE section D subsection 7, we charge it to local district. The district with responsibility for creating the PPT, the IEP, excuse me, and meeting the PPT, the planning and placement team meeting, and crafting the IEP because it's their student. They have educational jurisdiction on the student. So once they say the student requires PDC, that's what that student gets. They are neither the charter school nor the district school can say, yeah, well, we're not going to provide C. We're going to provide, or they can't say, oh, we're going to provide D too. And the charter school were to say, well, we're going to provide D, but it's not in the IEP. One, that would be contrary to law. Two, they'd be on the financial hook for that. So that's just part of the IEP.
Right. So I think it sounds to me, I think, summarize, there's not necessarily too much flexibility when we're giving D to the student.
Certainly not.
by the services.
Right.
So there's not too much room for districts to contain costs in that margin just because they need to provide the service. You know, they're, as you said, they're required to provide the services. So I'm trying to think like, you know, what options the districts have here. You know, given there's agreement about the services that are needed. You know, you mentioned the district can, you know, one method you mentioned, the district can opt to provide the services themselves.
That's right.
How often does that occur in practice?
Well, it's interesting. Brass City had said originally Waterbury used to do that. Waterbury used to provide like school psychologists. They used to do more of their, provide more of these services to their own staff. Obviously, if the district does that, the charter school can't charge for it because it's not an actual cost to the charter. Brass City, however, stated that as time gone by, this would become less and less.
So the district could do that.
And the district could do that either by having its own staff go to the charter school or hire someone or retain someone, agency to provide service.
And the district, they have that option.
Oh, absolutely. It's their student. Yeah, it's educational
jurisdiction to provide the services. So,
right.
I guess the other, but in practice, maybe that wasn't happening, at least in Waterbury recently. I guess the other question I have is, do you view this ruling as sort of ruling out, there's this distinction between objectivity and subjectivity that's sort of important for the room. Do you view this statement as sort of ruling out other objective measures? You can imagine, again, in healthcare settings, you know, maybe one way to do this is to say, sort of what you're proposing is to say, okay, I'll reimburse you for the cost of providing service. Another thing I might do if I were a healthcare provider is I would say, well, I'll set cost limits on different services you might provide based on what I think are reasonable costs or saving costs for me to provide these things. And allow, you know, reimburse you at this rate. Like there are limits on the cost of different services that are often provided. Would you view this as sort of ruling out an arrangement where the district said, you know, hey, we're not going to provide actual cost reimbursement, but we are going to reimburse you at a you know, somehow objectively defined based on the services that are rendered? I guess I'm trying to figure out how much flexibility the districts are left with here and things where the costs may be given.
I think that ultimately a district and charter school might get some understanding, some agreement, but as indicated, this has been an ongoing dispute. In fact, I have been involved in meetings with council for both Waterbury and Brass City and council for Booker T and New Haven, trying to resolve this. And they have been to no avail. But ultimately, student comes to the charter school, IEP designed by the district's PPT in hand. The charter schools, I noticed, you have to provide these services. And they're inherently reasonable because again, they're required, they're set forth in the IEP, district's IEP. And therefore, the cost of them is the cost of them. That's how it is. That's how districts treat their own students. And, you know, the charter students are entitled to the same type of the treatment. And I just want to say one thing, you indicated replacing actual, reasonable with actual. I don't think it's a replacement at all. Under the Connecticut Supreme Court case law, Connecticut Appellate Court case law with respect to statutory construction, you really have to look at the statute in a manner that it's reasonable and sensible. It works in conjunction with the statutes. And reasonable is not antonymic with actual. If something is required by law, it is required by a document prepared by the district, it's inherently reasonable. Again, as I said before, the district can't say, okay, we know that these are the reasonable services, but cost of them, yeah, pay for them. So we're not really replacing it. And I know that the districts are trying to make that argument that we're rewriting statute. We're not rewriting a statute at all. We're simply interpreting it.
Sure. So I guess my concern here essentially is just trying to rectify what perhaps was an unreasonable choice on the part of the districts in the past. I want to make sure we're not circumscribing, you know, our interpreting or declaring here the flexibility of districts for different kinds of funding.
You know, that's a great question, but I don't think they are, because I think that by the state board ruling, and the case law is very clear, you have wide latitude to declaratory rulings, that that we're really talking actual cost here, that actual cost and reasonable cost are synonymous for purposes of 10-66 EE subsection D subsection 7. that, okay, but there are noted that they have to have actual costs. Now, the charter schools have to have good documentation to show that, hey, these are actual costs we incurred. And then, they can then say, with that understanding that these are actual costs, the district and the charter school are then able to say, okay, rather than districts can say, well, this is how it is. So do we want to hire our own people? Do we want to provide the services ourselves? Do we want to try to go into negotiations with the charter school as to, whether we can work something out? But the bottom line is, the ultimate determination is that these are the costs for which they are entitled. Any problem?
Mike, just to follow up with what you just said, district could go into negotiations about whether we provide the services ourselves, and that is still something under this regulatory work ruling that they could do.
Right, yes, absolutely, it's part of the statute.
Okay, this is sort of a two-part question. So it seems like a bit of this dispute hinges on the coordinator position. And so first of all, I was just curious, do paras in public schools like New Haven and Waterbury handle testing, data entry, and contact with parents, or is that a similar coordinator position that exists? And then perhaps this negotiation thing that we've just been talking about gets at this, but what would prevent a charter school under this from like spreading staff, shall we say? So you've talked a lot about, reasonable is what's in the IEP. But what would prevent a charter school from hiring, 3 full-time special education coordinators, and they all do like 1/3 of the work, and they're not actually doing that, but they're being billed for that? Would this allow for that?
Well, if they're not doing the work, they're not entitled to reimbursement. Again, it is incumbent upon the charter school to provide documentation. That's something that the department has stressed in the past. That is something I stressed when I had my respective meetings with the parties back last year, that they have to provide documentation. So, no, if you have a special ed teacher who's spending half their time teaching English or doing non-special education tasks, well, that would not be an actual special education cost incurred by the charter school, so therefore would not be reimbursable. In district, different districts approach it a different way with respect to the first part of your question. Very often in public schools, each child will have a case manager. The case manager is typically the special ed teacher. And the case manager is responsible for coordinating, the PEDs and contacting the parent and so forth. But some districts do have more of an administrative level position. For instance, a lot of them have an out-of-district placement coordinator who just deals with students out of district placement and so forth. But some do have administrative positions in which they oversee, especially I think in bigger districts when you have more students, they oversee the scheduling of PPT meetings, ensuring that assessments are done, just talking with parents, that sort of thing. It's really, there's no one size fits all with respect to that. It really depends on a district by district. Okay. Good. Thank you. You're very welcome.
I heard. All right. A little different question. First of all, it's been stated that the charter school is responsible for providing good documentation. What constitutes good documentation, and what happens if there's a dispute with documentation?
Well, that then becomes a kind of a private, discussion, a private issue between the charters and the setting district. I mean, they have to act in good faith. Documentation would be pay record, an accounting of, okay, we have the speech and language pathologist that we brought in. We don't have a full-time speech and language pathologist. Speech and language pathologist is coming in this many hours a week. These students provide one-on-one or small group sessions. They would have to, again, private pay records, documentation of what hours they were in, copy of the contract that would show what the hourly rate is. It's under the brief. I mean, charter schools obviously are not, they're not profit driven entities. They're not profit. They really have no reason prior to make profits because they're nonprofit. But I think documentation such as that. Now, once they've provided the documentation, then districts, really in good faith, have to accept it. That's not to say that they have to blindly accept it. If there are deficiencies, if there are discrepancies, where they're entitled to get their picture as to what they are paying for. And ultimately, it's their obligation to provide special education to ensure the student is making progress on their IEP. So, that's part and parcel to make sure that the child is receiving the services that are in the IEP.
To follow up on that question, in terms of contracting with an hourly employee, as a teacher in a public school, if that was occurring in my public school, that would be seen potentially as an unfair labor practice.
Right.
Could you comment on the difference or similarities in a charter school?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great point. What a lot of districts will do, they will obviously try to fill with their own staff. But there are shortage areas. We need occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech and language pathologists. Sometimes can be very difficult to find. And it is not uncommon at all. Based upon my own experience representing school board, it is not uncommon at all for districts because they don't have the resources. They tried to hire, they haven't been able to hire someone. Because you're absolutely right. That will be the first thing they try to do. They collective bargaining agreements with teachers union, and obviously they got to try to hire certified staff first to provide these services. But if they don't have it, if they can't find these people on the one hand, on the other hand, they have this legal obligation to provide these services, they will often contract with an agency, provide OT, PT services. That's kind of, I don't want to say a last resort, but that's kind of a second resort. The first resort trying to get their own staff to do it.
So in the case of a charter school deciding that they were going to hire an hourly employee, would that have to be done with permission or the knowledge of the sending district? Because again, if this was occurring within my district and the district unilaterally contracted outside without consultation to the teachers union, we would consider that an unfair labor practice.
Well, no, because it's a separate school, so it's not really governed by the collective bargaining agreement in place between the local district and their the CEA or AFT branch. This is a different school. They have different labor structures with their teachers, and quite frankly, in a way, that would benefit the district because if you have 4 kids, let's say in a charter school that requires speech and language services, the charter school said, okay, we're going to hire a full-time speech and language pathologist for children. So that would be very expensive and unnecessarily expensive, and quite frankly, would be outside the actual cost parameters of providing services to those students. So in those cases, going out and hiring someone to come in and provide services on an hourly basis would be permissible and also financially better for districts.
Change the scope of my business for a moment. So as a regular education teacher, I have students in my classroom. I'm the one that's predominantly required and to modify work for my classes, to modify curriculum if necessary, in consultation with the student's case manager, who would be another special education teacher in my building. Is the time or the workload associated with my modification of work for my classes for students with IEPs something that my school district can account for in terms of special education expenses?
I would say no. As I was saying before, it's just like if you have a full-time charter school in Brass City or Booker T, you have a full-time special ed teacher, and they're providing direct instruction, but they're also updating the goals and objectives. They're, reviewing data, contacting the parent, all the things that a special ed teacher would do in your district. That's all subsumed into the salary. That's part and parcel. If you have a regular ed teacher, you can directly speak to your example. No, I would say not, because again, that's part and parcel of their obligation to the teacher. So they couldn't say, well, I'm a physics teacher and I've been providing physics, but gee, I had to modify the lesson plan for these kids. I had to, shorten testing, so forth and so on, whatever. And take data. That's part of their job, just so that it would be in a local district.
And going back to the previous question about there possibly being different models of who does what work requirements. So in a district where it is the special education teacher who writes the IEP, attends the PPT meetings, conducts the majority of the assessments, contacts the parents, is it reasonable to assume that the sending district and the charter school should have the same model in terms of the delivery of the services required by the student? Or is that not reasonable? And is there a legal distinction in there?
I don't know if there's a legal distinction, and I don't know if I can really speak to specific circumstances like that, but I would say if, as you have postulated, you have special ed teacher who is doing all those things, drafting proposed goals and objectives in the area of anemic awareness, something like that. Or if you have someone, the special ed teacher calling the parent, saying, hey, I'm meeting with a parent, I'm calling the parent, and that's all part and parcel of their salary. That's their obligation. They don't get extra points, well, they do get extra points in the great universe, but they don't get extra financial points. They don't get, I'll tell you an anecdote. Many years ago, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was updated. I think it was either the 97 or the 2004 reauthorization. And that, one of the two, I think it was 97, provided that a student who was taking any regular education class, the PPT had to have at least one regular education teacher. I remember going out and doing in services, and a couple of times regular education teachers would say, am I going to get paid more going to the PPT? That you're going to get the same that the special ed teacher gets, which is nothing more, because that's part and parcel of your duty. So it's the same thing here. They are conducting these services as part of special education or even regular education, full-time salary, all falls within the cost of salary.
And
I excuse me, but I would also say that if you have a regular education teacher who's doing like class modifications, that sort of thing, or provide, drafting notes, class notes for a student might need them. That's part of the regular teacher's obligation as well. That would not really rise to reimbursable special ed cost.
so with this declaratory ruling, would we intentionally or unintentionally be creating the possibility of a two-tiered system in which in the sending district, it is the regular job expectation of a special education teacher to do many of the things that I just enumerated, but in the receiving charter school, that is not the expectation of that special education teacher. And instead, a different administrative person is also hired to incur those costs and to perform those tasks. Is that not inherently a two-tiered system?
Frankly, I think the denial of the declaratory ruling would create a two-tiered system for the reasons I said before. I think that really comes down to the model that is most efficacious for the provision of special education student. And I think that charter school, if they say, well, we have to hire this additional administrative person, think that we have so many students, we only have one teacher, we have so many students, we would need this to coordinate services. They would have to justify that and document the services that person is actually providing in order to get reimbursement for it. But I don't think that you could just say sweepingly that this is what we do in the district, this is what we're going to do in the charter school. For example, to turn that kind of on its ear, let's say charter school didn't have such an administrative person, but the local district did. Under that rationale, the charter school would have to go out and get hire an administrative person. So it really is a case-by-case basis that has to be guided by, one, common sense, and two, one is required to ensure that the charter, because again, the charter school, the state statute, they're required to implement the IEP. So they have a certain obligation too, to say the least. So it really comes down to, okay, this is what we need to do to ensure that we are fulfilling our statutory obligation to provide child services.
And I'm just going to revisit my first question to make sure that you are there understanding. If there is a dispute over what documentation is provided in the standard documentation, what recourse does the sending district have?
Well, I think what the problem has been so far, as indicated during public comment, that there has been I think there's a certain extent an almost willful refusal to accept documentation by the sending district. I think the sending district has to accept as valid documentation that's provided, so long as there is documentation and not just, yeah, we had a teacher do such and such, but, that really documents hours spent, that sort of thing. And if the district and the charter school have a dispute over it, that's something that those two have to work out. But with the declaratory ruling establishes this is the baseline. This is what we're calculating our different positions on, what the actual costs are, and then going from there. As opposed to now, when you have one party saying, well, this is what it's costing us to educate your student in the charter school, and the district saying, damn it, we don't think we should pay that. If we think what's reasonable is X, the actual cost is Y. Even this declaratory ruling would essentially recognize that in the limited context of special education students with IEPs, and actual and reasonable are one and the same. And therefore, that's what has to be determined. That is the baseline on which any discussion of reimbursement follows.
My final question, several people in public comment made the suggestion that more time could be given to this issue to further examine the issue. Made the suggestion to table. In your legal opinion, what benefit or drawback is there for more time for discussion or exploring other options?
I don't see an advantage to that. This has been going on for a while. This declaratory ruling is predicated upon, and frankly, I think the continued failure to reimburse charter schools for the provision of the special education services is a direct violation of the law. And therefore, I think that continuing this and letting it continue the way it has would not resolve the issue. We haven't resolved it yet. I have had meetings trying to work it out. It comes to some, tough moment. We haven't got there. And I think that we cannot, the state board, which does again, under Connecticut case law, have great and statutory authority as well, has the right to issue declaratory ruling. That if the state board says that, well, we're not going to do that. And the reason set forth in this proposed declaratory ruling, I think it's counted and saying by violation of the law. Wrong.
So I'm sitting here, really trying to understand this, like on my first day back. And
I didn't say condolences.
And one hand. I need Jimmy Jackson. Constant fight. Education. Listening to been here a couple of times. So I'm swayed by it, but then at the same time, I'm more swayed by the law. That's the job of educating kids, all on really noble people. And you have to educate them, no matter what. And so I see this, frankly, in my very limited understanding,
very honest about that. There are two issues here, two primary issues in my opinion. One, this issue, right, and that the fact that this is law. Two, that, you know, and I grew up very place, very little place. That this is what happens when there's not enough money. And I feel like, and this may be totally inappropriate, but I feel like the mayor of Waterbury should be, and or the mayor of New Haven would be. Because if there is not enough money allocated to the sphere of public education in those, in these two cities, especially because they are here from me, that's a city issue that is now being manifested and played out in the sphere of public education. And so that's my really kind of juvenile understanding of this. But I know instinctively, because of how I grew up and what I grew up in, that you know, inequity holds sway. And these types of things are always going to happen, this type of discourse. And what I was hoping didn't come out of this was this kind of formal public, traditional public versus charter social discourse where no one wins. And so I just wanted to say that. Because, you know, just knowing Dr. Jackson and constant fight for young people, you know, and at the same time, understanding what educational law is, the foundation of that, and why it was part to society. But I just wanted to get a better understanding, and I think I do. Questions that's what you're.
Thank you.
Anything further? And the motion is to approve the adopt and enter the declaratory ruling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. And I just again want to reiterate my thanks to my colleague, Attorney Tedisco, who was an extraordinary job in carrying this forward. So thank you.
And then the motion on 7B for approving the new educator preparation focus.
Good morning, Vice Chair Benham and board members.
Central Connecticut State University submitted a new program proposal to offer an initial certification program in comprehensive special education at the undergraduate level. They are already approved by the board to offer this program at the graduate level and are now seeking approval to offer the program at the undergraduate level. The undergraduate program was reviewed to ensure that it, that it meets all requirements and is consistent with their already approved master's degree program. The new undergraduate program will offer the opportunity for more educators to be certified and address the critical shortage of special education. I have here with me today Dr. Paula Tulte and Dr. Megan Mackey, who will tell you more about their program and are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. So I'm Megan Mackey. I am the chair of the Department of Special Education and Interventions and the program coordinator for special education at Central. We were originally Teachers College, and we've had our special education program. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary a year ago. So we've had the master's initial certification for 50 plus years. Why it took so long for us to get here is a whole nother story. So this undergraduate certification, which ironically enough, you've heard a lot about special education today, is in such a huge need. And my colleagues in Waterbury, we're actually working with them because they currently have a shortage of 50 special ed teachers. So we're working with them to build a teacher education pipeline. This undergraduate degree will really help us build out. We're creating a para-educator. And I know I saw in your minutes from last month, you celebrated para-educators, so we know how significant they are to special education. So we're building a teacher residency program, and this will provide another pathway for us to get people into those critical roles in special education.
Good morning, everyone. Paula Talty, Interim Dean of CCSU. First, before I say anything about our program, I want to recognize that Kristen Record is the child of a teacher who I worked with years ago in Cromwell as a new assistant principal. So I'm so happy to see this esteemed group. We have been trying very diligently to respond to our colleagues' needs in the districts. As you may be aware, CCSU has a very well-established partnership with a variety of school districts, both urban and suburban throughout the capital region and beyond. One of the largest needs that districts have currently is for special education teachers. And we have paraeducators in those districts who have been dedicated to those communities and those students who would like the opportunity to become a special ed teacher, which is one of the impetuses behind this. We have an outstanding master's program that grants initial certification for teachers in special education, but the need is growing, and we are currently trying to help teachers who are undergrad candidates, teacher candidates who are at the undergrad level achieve their dream of becoming a special education teacher. And this new program will help us to. And so we thank you today for your consideration of our.
Oh, you came in perfect.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, I was just curious how long we're thinking it was gonna take to fill something like those 50 open spots, given interest and something like that.
Oh, I wish it was very, very quickly. But we already have, once we hopefully get official approval here, we'll be able to actually recruit actively for this. And we have we've already had preliminary conversations with people who have expressed interest, but they have an associate's degree or they've started some college work. And we're like, well, right now we can only do the master's level. But Waterbury, I believe when they just kind of surveyed, they had 37 paras who collectively were interested in one of the pathways. So and we set up a 2-year timeline for our residency program. So, and we're looking at other high needs districts as well to build a partnership with. I also want to say, even though our colleagues at the University of St. Joseph brought about 17 people to advocate for their program, we also will advocate for their program, but don't think the lack of people coming to us is an indication of how significant this is.
Record. Good morning. Thank you for it's very nice to see you. I have a lot of high school students that are not paras, but they are looking to go to a community college to then transfer into a 4-year state college. Could you comment on how that pathway works and supports your program?
So we've actually, I recently met with our in the dean's office, the assistant dean who looks at the undergraduate element and says, and how can we grease the wheels? Essentially, we want to try to remove as many obstacles as possible for our for paraprofessionals or people even coming from high school who maybe or coming in. We want to have it be as easy as possible to get in this, whether you have a few college credits, no college credits, and associates. And so we're trying to get as many of the special education, thankfully, to generalizing a number of our gen ed undergrad requirements, whereas some content areas you have to take a specific history or a specific science. So we've really tried to water that down, not in content, but allow for more transfer credits so that we can catch them later in their, we can start them later once they get to Central.
So would it be a true statement that regardless of the pathway into Central, that candidates that are enrolled in this program would primarily start education training in what I would consider to be their junior year, third year, or fourth year? How would that work?
We can start them at any point. We actually, for ones who are coming in as true freshmen or freshwomen or first years, we'll go with first years. We are starting them right in education right then. And then those who start later, we can capture their general education in transfer credits and then just have them capture those education courses. Maybe they're taking them later. So we can move things around much more fluidly because of the ability to transfer credits and have them count for things. And so we've built that into the schedule so that we can, I mean, it'd be hypocritical. We are special educators if we weren't adaptive, to different situations. And essentially it's an individualized education program for every single student that we have. And we consider their needs, even with the water grade pipeline we're going out to them. We're minimizing their need to drive to campus. And so the same things with, we're identifying obstacles. We're having conversations with people in various situations to say, what are the obstacles and how can we eliminate or reduce them to open up the pathway for this education.
Thank you. I appreciate your thoughtfulness in terms of reducing barriers to putting highly qualified educators in our classrooms. Thank you.
One of the other things we did, just to add on, this has been a multi-tiered approach from the special ed and needs office. Even before I came into this interim role, we've expanded our concurrent enrollment offerings in high schools to be able to place into some of those junior and senior classes for high school students education required courses, so that some students will come to us already having met certain prerequisites.
Any further questions? And the motion on the floor is to approve of the new educator preparation program, Central Connecticut State University, comprehensive special education undergraduate level. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. 2.5 years. 2.5 years.
It's their fault.
Go team.
Yeah. Next up is St. Joe's. You got it?
Member St. Joe's.
The University of St. Joseph submitted a new program proposal to offer an initial certification program in integrated early childhood at the undergraduate level. They are already approved to offer this program at the graduate level and are now seeking approval to offer at the undergraduate level. It was reviewed to ensure that it meets all requirements and is consistent with their already approved master's degree program. The new undergraduate program will offer the opportunity for more future educators to become certified and will address the shortage of early childhood educators. I have here with me today Meredith McConaughey, Dr. Ashley Oldham, and Dr. Diana Wenzel, who will tell you more about their program and are available to answer questions. My colleague Lauren DeFree will share information about USJ's accreditation timeline.
Or we move forward, excuse me, we do need a motion.
Well, that,
You may proceed. My hair.
Hello. I just wanted to point out one piece of the board report. So you may have noticed that the University of St. Joseph's new undergraduate program in early childhood was given an approval date until March 31st, 2025. The reason for this is simply to align the undergraduate program to the institution's continuing approval timeline. USJ's continuing approval for all of their educator programs goes until March 31st, 2025. So next winter, all of USJ's programs will come before this board for continuing approval. That decision will be based on the accreditation decision of the Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation Programs. So the undergraduate early childhood program will become part of that continuing approval process and be included in the next accreditation cycle. So it's simply that the approval date of this program had to sync up with the approval timeline of USJ's educative programs in their entirety. So I didn't want folks on the board to see the shortened timeframe and think it's any kind of reflection of the quality of the program or any concerns about the program. That's not the case at all. It's simply, it has to line up with their approval decision, which comes later, whereas CCSU's is a different timeline. So always the new program syncs up with the continuing approval timeline of the EPP as a whole. So I just wanted to front load that information.
Thank you. You answered the question I had.
Oh, I didn't know how to write that in the board report. That would make sense.
I want to get back really quick. I know Mr. Taylor had a question that I got, so thank you for putting that out there for everyone to understand. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Benham, Commissioner Russell Tucker, and our esteemed colleagues in the talent office, Lauren DeFrady and Dr. Shawana Tucker, and our collaborators from the Office of Early Childhood. I can't see them. I might get dizzy if I turn too fast. And esteemed board members, thank you so much for all of your work and for your time to consider our proposal. The University of St. Joseph, as some of you in this room know personally, has a long history and tradition of preparing teachers. It was at the heart of our founding as an institution by the Sisters of Mercy, and it continues to be a deep investment and commitment on the part of our president, our board of trustees, and everyone in the Department of Education. So we're thrilled to bring this proposal that builds on a program, a really robust and important program at the graduate level directed by Dr. Behrens McConaughey, who will share a little bit more in a minute. We're thrilled to bring this undergrad pathway to you. We're all invested in responding to the shortage of teachers, specifically in special education. This program was designed with inclusive educators in mind. That's the title of the pathway, Inclusive Early Childhood Education, and it's at the heart of the CERT, 113 CERT. We're balancing, and Meredith will talk about this, both NIAC and CEC, early childhood standards and special education, I think really beautifully and powerfully based on our experience. And we want teachers at the high school level, right, who are choosing this great profession, and we need more of them to choose this great profession, to have this option as undergraduate students. We hear from them, from their families, that they're interested. So we're really, really excited and hope to answer any questions that you have, but I will pass this down.
Actually, I think we have a nice microphone here, so I'll project a little bit as well. Good morning, everyone. I am just going to echo a little bit of what Dr. Olderman said. We are very excited about our graduate program that we currently have been running. We've really worked to develop the rigor of the program and really put inclusive early childhood education at the forefront. We have expertise amongst our faculty in supporting multilingual learners at the young level, as well as expertise in different kinds of disabilities and supporting neurodiverse learners. And we are super excited now to be able to offer this opportunity at the undergraduate level. We have continued to hear interest amongst high school students, as Ashley said, as well as we have potential transfer students who are now considering our programs. And we've been working with the Office of Early Childhood as part of a state and federal grant to support early childhood education. As a part of that work too, we've had conversations with our community colleges to try to figure out, there was a question earlier about transferring from associate level to the undergraduate bachelor's level. And so we are having those conversations right now to try to make that accessible and make it a smooth transfer so that they can continue and pursue the bachelor's level and licensure at the state level.
Not going to hear from Dr. Glenn. Back in the room.
If you have questions,
questions. It's an honor and truly a pleasure to be back in the room after all this time to see old friends. And thank you for considering our proposal. My work in the department is in the area of clinical practice and partnerships. And this really was a huge partnership effort. We're really grateful to the guidance and support from the State Department of Ed Talent Office. They were with us every step of the way. And the Office of Early Childhood that provided a grant that helped us with the work to align the program to both the NIAC standards. It was already aligned with the CEC standards and to bring it to the undergraduate level. So we're really very excited to be offering that. We already have students that are just really wanting to sign up. And we all know that the early years are the time to support students so that they are able to succeed when they are in pre-K-12 public school settings, and to address special ed needs as early as possible, to recognize them as early as possible, so that students are able to take full advantage of what their public school systems have to offer. We also have a unique partnership. We work with so many schools and we love that, but we have a unique partnership with our own school for young children, which makes, I think, us very well suited to do this. So our students will get a lot of experience in public school settings, both in the pre-K special ed and in the 1-3 setting, or K-3 setting. But they also get a really great foundation in child development for a partnership with the School for Young Children. So we're very excited to bring this to you today and to be part of your work in making sure that every student in Connecticut has a highly qualified team. Members.
In your being an undergraduate level program, is the degree a bachelor's degree or is it a 3+2 integrated? Bachelor's degree. Thank you.
Commissioner, and I do have a very strong connection, both graduate. I have fond memories of working in the Chamber Center.
No, thank you for that, but I wanted to thank you for innovating, and for those around the table that don't know, because you may be new or even new deputy commissioners, Dr. Wenzel was Commissioner of Education. One of the numbers that I served under here at the agency, but just appreciate that. I'm sure we can tell me later what you thought, just sitting there listening to all the deliberations that happens.
But you'll like it better. But not soon, I hope.
But I really appreciate that we have our institutions that are really innovating and thinking about what we need to do as a state. We think about the pipeline and how to diversify the educator workforce. And so it is a partnership. It's what we do here, it's what you do on the board, but it's also what our higher ed institutions are also doing. So this is a true partnership working together. So appreciate the continued innovation at your end. And looking at areas that we know are shortage areas that we really need to lean in on. So it's just a personal thank you for the work. And of course, goes without saying, the team in the talent office that continues to navigate and move this thing through. So that's just my personal thank you for that.
Motion on the floor is the approval of the new education preparation program at the University of St. Joseph. Early childhood, elementary education and special education undergraduate level. In favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Next up, I'll entertain a motion on the approval of Commissioners Network Turnaround Plan for Plymouth School and Bridgeport.
That's nice. And you're on the side right here. Thank you, Commissioner Russell Tucker, Vice Chair Benham, and board members. Welcome, new board members. In your board packet for your consideration is the Commissioners Network Turnaround Plan for Columbus School and Bridgeport. With me today to support the recommendation is my colleague Jennifer Webb, Bureau Chief for the Turnaround Office, and Dr. Carmela Levy-David, Superintendent of Bridgeport Public Schools, and Linda Bagol, Principal of Columbus School. The department received an expression of interest on April 7th, 2023 from the Bridgeport Public Schools volunteering Columbus School participation in the Commissioners Network to access supports and resources, whether that be physical, human, or financial, to improve student achievement. The Columbus School Turnaround Plan, as presented to the Accountability of Support Subcommittee of the State Board on April 11th, 2024, is before you today. Very large packet. This is the result of a very strong partnership between the Turnaround Office and the team in Bridgeport. I would like to recognize Margaret Hughes, our education consultant for the department, for her support to Columbus School through the year-long process of developing the Columbus School Turnaround Plan. At this time, I would like to invite Jen Webb to share a brief overview of this plan, as well as invite Superintendent Levy-David to.
Morning, everyone. So it is an extensive plan, so I'm going to give you a brief highlight. Columbus aims to improve teaching and learning by utilizing strategies, methods, and best practices that have proven to be effective at improving student academic performance. Their turnaround plan includes high-quality professional learning, rigorous curricula, and assessments that are aligned with the Connecticut core standards, and building and maintaining meaningful and positive productive relationships between students and staff. Participation in the Commissioners Network will support the professional development of the Columbus teaching staff, coaching opportunities in literacy and numeracy, expansion of the data-driven decision-making process, additional learning opportunities for students, and the communication of the school's vision to the Bridgeport community. I'm going to ask Dr. Levy-David to share a few words.
Good morning. I want to take a moment to thank you for the opportunity to consider Columbus School for this process. I'm very happy with the plan that has been developed thus far and fully supportive of Linda Bajoli and the staff at Columbus, and look forward to a very productive partnership with all of the amazing resources and technical support needed to ensure their success.
From the board, some of you saw the school come forward in accountability, but there might be some questions, folks that weren't there. None. We will, the motion on the floor is to approve of the Commissioners Network turnaround plan for Columbus School and Bridgeport. All in favor? Us? Congratulations. What you've already did so. I'll entertain a motion on approval of the Commissioners Network turnaround plan. Augusta Troop School in Haven. Congratulations. This also came in from accountability for those newer board members.
And thank you again. In your packet is the Commissioners Network turnaround plan for Augusta Lewis Troop School. And with me today again, for Webb, we do have Dr. Negron, Superintendent of New Haven Public Schools, and Eugene of Augusta Lewis Troop School. So we received the expression of interest from New Haven on April 18, 2023, volunteering Augustus Lewis Troop for participation in the Commissioners Network to receive the same supports, resources, and technical assistance for student achievement. This turnaround plan, as presented, as you said, to accountability support on April 11th, represents that strong partnership between the department and the turnaround office, and certainly New Haven team. I would like to recognize Iris White, education consultant for the department, for her support to Augustus Troop and New Haven Public Schools throughout the year-long process in developing this plan for you. At this time, I asked Jen Webb to share a brief overview of this particular plan for New Haven.
So the focus of Troop's turnaround plan is to improve staff knowledge of instructional practices with writing across the content areas to ensure increased rigor, student engagement, and student outcome. Their plan includes high-quality professional learning to ensure that staff understands the components of Tier 1 instruction, quality, rigorous mathematics instruction, using data to differentiate and target instruction for students, and building and maintaining meaningful and productive relationships between students, staff, and families. Participation in the Commissioners Network will support the professional development of Troops teaching staff, coaching opportunities in literacy and numeracy, expansion of the data-driven decision-making process, and additional learning opportunities for students. Do you have a few words?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for considering Troop in New Haven as part of the Commissioners Network. We are looking forward to being able to join the resources that exist within the network already and being able to leverage the different opportunities and resources that come as a result of being a member of the network to continue to increase outcomes for students who attend Troop School. I am fully confident that we have the right leadership in the building and Principal Foreman, who is dedicated to serving the entire school community. And as a district, we are ready to be all hands on deck to make sure that we have an opportunity to transform outcomes at Troop School. Thank you.
Done. Vote on the floor is the approval of the Commissioners Network turnaround plan for Augusta Lewis Troop School in New Haven. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow, yeah. Thank you. Item 7F is actually going to fall under the Commissioners report, so we're going to be bounced back to item number 4, the consideration of the minute. I have a motion on our minutes of April 3rd, 2024. Any changes, edits? Meetings? Yes, we're sorry. All in favor? Opposed? A couple items to bring to your attention. The first, Mr. Harris and I attended a forum on education diversity last week at LB, which the commissioner was spoke of the agency's efforts of obtaining teachers of color as being an ongoing priorities. So that was very well. I also attended just this past Monday a data walk about the Connecticut's unspoken crisis held at the Capitol, and it was sponsored by Dahlia Education. You might remember some board members that came in front of us in the fall talking about that report. I did take a copy to the newer board members if you have one. It is there for you if you'd like it. Willingly hearings will resume. We have 2 scheduled, May 16th and May 24th. Yeah, this has really been a prolonged process, not by any means on our end, or quite frankly, the agency's end, where we were hoping we really do get some kind of resolution. But we do have 2 scheduled, so I'll report on that perhaps next month. And then the other thing I just wanted to bring to your attention, and our lovely clerk Alfred will follow up, so you don't have to take notes, but just looking at the calendar coming up, there are a couple of changes. June 5th is our regular scheduled board meeting. There will be no July meeting. We don't usually meet in July. This will open up perhaps for our new members, our board will, brand new members to the board, that there is a NASB new member conference taking place in Washington, D.C., which I believe you'll get some invites if you haven't already to attend. And I'll have more information on that for you. August 7th is our board retreat that was scheduled. September 4th is a normally scheduled meeting. And October 9th is our scheduled meeting. However, I want to point out to you that will be an evening meeting and the place and time to be determined. Now that I've carried you all the way through October. Yes, we'll get that all right. I just wanted to get it on the record because, we do have our next meeting is June 5th, but after that, they do. So you will get that on that. So to bring us to present day, we will go to the Commissioner's report.
Thank you, Vice Chairman, and all the board members. Is it still morning? It is morning. So good morning. It's our pleasure specifically to welcome our new and our reappointed board members today. On behalf of the State Department of Education, we welcome you and look forward to working with all of you in supporting your onboarding. And from our board agenda today, you can see that you will never have a dull moment with the myriad of issues that will come in front of you. And I really just want to say is that I'm sure the first action item was a tough one for all, and you should know the same is true internally when we're grappling and working through and navigating all of that and decision making. And just so you know, for us, always thinking about students and what's best for them wherever they are in our system. And so it helps to anchor the decision making. But it nevertheless is always something that we grapple with. And so I could see and hear and your thinking and processing of the decision making in your vote, but I just want to know that we're doing the same thing before we bring an item in front of the board for action. In my report today, I will just highlight, and in your supplemental packet for board members, there's always the commissioner's report tucked in there. And I always try to highlight the work that we're doing that's aligned to our state board priorities. Every student prepared for learning, life, and work beyond school. And you have the full report, but I'll just highlight a few of them. The first is under board priority 1, ensuring equitable access to education. I was pleased to provide remarks at the Stand Up for STEM Mentorship Awards on the importance of mentors and the needs for more girls and women to engage in STEM and STEM careers. You got a picture on the screen with those 2 students who were also recognized from Farmington and Hampton Public Schools at the event. But our future is truly bright when you think about what our students are doing. I'm always there encouraging them to stay in Connecticut for their career and also to get into education as well. I also participated, as you heard from Vice Chair Benham, in the Diversity Forum, legislators and other stakeholders to talk about the work that we're doing here, always talking about the work that you've led around our educator diversity, the progress we're making, and all the continued work that we're doing on at the agency as well. Under the other board priority, ensuring safe and healthy learning environments, I participated in our Interagency Council on Homelessness. And just for everyone's knowledge, in January, Governor Lamont established a panel of agency leaders, heads to this Connecticut Interagency Council on Homelessness that is responsible for collaborating on a multi-agency approach that strengthen the state's homelessness prevention and response efforts. And the department is an ad hoc member of the council, so we had a meeting. And just for level setting as well, and so when we think about, we do have students experiencing homelessness in our state, too many, over 5,000 of them. And you should know that over 82% of those students are students of color. Over 27% of them are students with disabilities, and over 22% of them are Indian learners, multilingual learners. So I'm always keeping that number in front of us. So being a part of the council where we can all, as agency leaders, talk about this issue and not only talk, but the plan or action going forward as it remains a priority for Governor. I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well. In elevating our curriculum frameworks, kudos to the team for having recently disseminated our complete K-8 curriculum for English language arts, now available for access and implementation. Kudos to the academic office staff, Chief Academic Officer, Teresa is in the room, you saw her here, and they worked meticulously on this model with more coming forward. And I know you bring that to our committee meeting as well, so I want to thank them for that. And finally, to share with you, board priority creating opportunities for students with multiple career pathway options. We had the 2nd annual Workforce Summit not too long ago, a full-day event led by the Government Workforce Council under the leadership of our board member, who I know she's not here today, but Dr. Kelly Valeries. And this summit featured key stakeholders from business, education, community-based organizations, and the public sector working together to build a skilled workforce that meets our economy's growing needs. And this year's summit was entitled Discovering the Hidden Talent, developing a more diverse and inclusive Connecticut workforce. And we're very much a part of that
But I had the privilege to moderate a panel of young people to bring their voices. There were 5 panelists. Their stories highlight how intentional partnerships in K-12, schools and business and industry can equip them with the skills needed to thrive academically and professionally in today's workforce. And in the program booklet, it was really nice that we had in that an ad, which was the state board plan, was advertised in the booklet with a QR code so that folks could access your state board plan. So really good about that. And you see other things happening, but I'll transition to another report that I just wanted to bring to you. G. Capella Christian is going to join us here. And it won't be lengthy, but it's a report that was sent out to board members previously as a supplemental packet again. And that is content area licensure assessment. And the results from that report that I need to and where we're going now, because I know there's a lot of conversation specifically around praxis and what needs to happen there. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, tell you where we are, and as a board, understand the department's position and the work going forward, and answer any questions that you have. So I've transitioned to Ajit Gopala Krishnan, who is our Chief Performance Officer. Ajit.
Thank you, Commissioner. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the new board members. Really delighted to have you on board. Ajit Gopala, I'm the Chief Performance Officer for the department. So you have the full paper in front of you, but I'm just going to use a few of those in the slide deck here. The link to the report is on the deck as well, so it is available online. We have disseminated it. Essentially, the legislature charged us to look at multiple ways of getting at content area certificate, to demonstrate content area mastery for teachers. And so we started with looking at our own data. It asked us to examine our own pass rates on the praxis, and it also, we also engaged the.
I'm sorry, what?
We also contracted with the Boston University's Wheelock Policy Center to look at our data as well. So just first an orientation on Praxis 2. Praxis 2 is not a single assessment based on the content area certification that you're pursuing. The assessment or assessments, there could be many. So for elementary, for example, a teacher would take 4 assessments: English, math, science, and social studies, appropriate for the elementary level content area. And there's a link there that points you to that. And for every test, there is a cut score that's established, and the cut score is really done to differentiate the just qualified candidate from the not quite qualified candidate. And if you're familiar with standard settings on assessments, they bring panels of educators and IHE representatives who work on that particular content area, and they have them review the assessment and sort of figure out where in that assessment, how many of those items do they have to sort of get right. I'm being very rough here, but just to sort of draw that line in the sand, if you will, in terms of what's pass and what's not pass. And our cut scores align with what the ETS recommended cut scores are for the just qualified candidate. So the point here is that we're not expecting complete mastery and complete expertise. We're not looking for the advanced expert here. We're looking for the just qualified candidate. And that's where these cut scores are established. And why is assessing content knowledge important? And I just put up a slide here, and there's a link to this in the report, in the full report, but I just picked a couple of items from elementary, Smarter Balanced, English Language Arts, and Mathematics. I mean, these, again, you can't read the items, but there's extensive reading, multi-step problem solving, not one right answer. In a lot of cases, there is reasoning that is involved with these items, even at the elementary level, and that the educator is really expected to have deep knowledge, deep content knowledge, so that they can really explain the material in many different ways to different students, because not everybody learns necessarily when explained in one way. So I think just to sort of put that out there is like some baseline content knowledge is key. So as part of this work, and this was laborious, and I really have to give kudos to several members on my team who, and talent, Lauren Frady and Stephanie O'Day and John Watson in particular, worked extensively with ETS data and with the certification data and so on to really come up with this dashboard. So now we actually have an educator preparation dashboard on Insight where you can actually see how many candidates are there in EPPs, how many are completing, how many are then passing praxis, how many are going on to get their certification, how many then are employed, and who's employed in high need districts, alliance districts in this case, and other districts within 1 year after completing their EPP, and who's remaining employed. So all that information for students who go through our EPP is now available through this dashboard. So it's yeoman's work, and pass rates are in there too. There's also a secure side to this through EdSite Secure. EPPs actually have access now to their own educators. So they can actually see how did my completers do, not only on praxis, which they get, but who ended up getting certification and where are they working? They can actually track that down to the individual level in terms of following up on those ed prep program completers. So it's a really powerful thing, and we, again, lots of people doing a lot of hard work to get to this. So we used that data that we had built to actually, to inform this report as well. When we looked at Praxis 2, we looked at, and this is really a snippet, a snapshot. We have a lot more data here. But we looked at the number of exams that folks are taking, the number of tests, because one person may end up taking many tests because it's not just one-to-one with some of these areas. We looked at what percentage of those tests were passed in the first attempt, and then what were passed like the best attempt. So if they take it more than once, we look at what's their best sort of score in that. And when we looked at prior to the pandemic, what we see is that for candidates of color as well as for white candidates, and then in the ed prep data, by the way, there are many who don't indicate a race. And so unless they end up working in public schools, we may not know their race ethnicity. So there are always some candidates who show up as not reported in the data. We see that over 90%, I mean, almost 97% in total, and over 90% of all groups show that they're passing the tests that they're taking. So it's a high pass rate among those who complete programs. I should note two things. One is that the first attempt, in many cases, is taken well before the candidate completes their EPP, sometimes in the junior year. So students usually enroll in the ed prep program in their junior year of their bachelor's program, and then they complete with a bachelor's degree in their senior year. So sometimes they're taking this praxis. The first attempt can be in their junior year. Some of them want to get it out of the way. Some just want to try it, whatever the case may be. So the best attempt is often a good indicator. And we grouped candidates of color for this analysis because it is obviously smaller, and we didn't want to like put small ends, but in the secure side, you can actually break it out by individual races. And prior to the pandemic, you see over 90% best pass rates for Black African-American students and Hispanic students. After the pandemic, the pass rates drop a little bit for all groups actually, but you'll see educators of color, it goes below 90%, still over 86%, or yeah, about 86%. Overall, still over 90% of our folks are passing Praxis 2. And there's variability in the pass rates across institutions. And this is part of the report, and it's really just an extract from there. And, you know, part of this is having conversations with our ed prep programs about what sort of supports might students need, especially if you're running a master's-based program and you're using, you know, you're accepting people who have a bachelor's degree, but sometimes their bachelor's degrees might be from more than 2 decades ago. And where and in that bachelor's degree program, maybe there's one math course and they got a B- or a D+. We've seen these transcripts. And I'm sort of giving some examples from real life situations that we've looked at.
And so, you know, and in their master's program, they might not have really content preparation. It gets more into pedagogy because the content is expected to be there. And then when they go take the praxis, they are far away from the passing score. So we've seen those situations here, but as you can see across institutions, there is variability for candidates of color, and this data is only for candidates of color. So in a nutshell, what we see is about 12 to 1,300 students, and these are, again, looking across years, complete our EPPs, and they take over 3,000 tests. Our pass rates prior to the pandemic were over 90% for candidates of color and white candidates who completed the programs. After the pandemic, it dropped a little bit, but still, even after the pandemic, over 85% of both are completing. And our last data is 21-22. The 22-23 data is being processed now and will be up in the next couple of weeks because we have to wait for the EPPs to finish their year and then get the data to ETS and then get it complete. And there's a whole process. I'll forward you with that. And so we also had the Boston University's Wheelock Center. I mentioned this group. We actually shared a whole bunch of data with them, and they came up with very similar findings, at least on the pass rates. They also implemented the statistical approach called regression discontinuity, where they looked at people on either side of the passing score to sort of test the likelihood that they would end up in the profession. And they used the first attempt. And as you know, first attempt may not be when the person is even close to completing, but still, what they saw was that there is a little bit of discontinuity there. So when you see that among those who just passed the Praxis 2 on the first attempt, 82% obtained certification, whereas among those who just fall short, 75%, make it into the profession, if you will. So I think they sort of estimated that if you lowered the cut score slightly, approximately 4 points or half a standard deviation, that we would see about 25 more individuals in the teaching force at that discontinuity level. So it was a more rigorous scientific approach to this issue. So that gave us another sort of barometer of the challenge that we're facing in terms of those entering the teaching profession. And then as part of this study, we also had them look at other states and, and Massachusetts, our neighbor, we looked at what they're doing and as well as several other states that look at, alternatives to the test in terms of like those who are within sort of this one standard error of measurement, which is like a confidence interval of that passing score. And they say, you know what, if you're in that band and you just failed, we'll give you sort of this alternative. In Massachusetts particularly, they have something called the MTEL Flex, where the person gets to do something different. It's still a test. They still have to pay a slightly reduced fee, but they use Pearson, not ETS, so you still have to pay a fee and take this MTEL Flex. And they are, in their initial data, this was a little, maybe a year ago, they were seeing good number of retakes and passing. And there are some other states that also use, if you didn't pass, then EPP attestation and that type of thing. So a combination of approaches being used. So in terms of, go to the next slide. So what is Connecticut planning to do? So, even before the study was completed, we have been in conversations with ETS about this because we have been looking at this pass rate and who's not passing, what's the profile, et cetera. And so what we're actually going to pilot next year is a non-test-based approach for those who are within one standard error of passing their tests, their Praxis 2 tests. And this is going to be a pilot. And it's not going to, and we're currently looking at the elementary area because that's where the volume is in terms of those who don't pass. I mean, just the number of test takers, elementary is the big area. And frankly, with such high pass rates as we have, we go with some of the other areas, we really just have a handful of educators we're dealing with. So elementary seems to be the best place to start with this. And what we're looking at in that space is not having them take another, quote, standardized test, but based on their Praxis score, identifying the domain within the test that might have been a challenge for the educator and providing a little bit of a self-study remediation with a knowledge check. So it's not a standardized test because they've already taken the standardized test and demonstrated that they're close, that they almost have that. So we're sort of saying, we know that. So now instead of making them take another test again, why not give them the alternative of a knowledge check, a sort of a self-study at home, at least that's the initial thinking, at home self-study with a knowledge check that says, you know what? We have confidence that you're close, but we just want to beef up a little bit and then have a knowledge check that gives us the confidence that you've spent time with the material and then you complete that, then you're eligible to, you'll be deemed as sort of passing that content area. So that's the approach that we're considering, at least with the test-based alternative. Well, it's not really a test alternative, it's a non-test-based alternative to the test for those within that within that one standard error. We're also going to work with our EPPs because as you saw in the variability in that pass rate, there are some EPPs that clearly are helping our candidates of color pass praxis very successfully, and some who are not. So we want to sort of learn from the ones who are doing that well. What are they doing? How are they weaving some of the content remediation that might be necessary into their EPP and sort of, you know, sharing that more widely? And of course, if HB 5436 passes, then the commissioners convened group will be formalized into a Connecticut Educator Preparation Certification Board in the law, and that group will then sort of take this discussion further to look at the policy landscape in general, but also assessments in particular. But, you know, I imagine I'll be going to a few of those meetings.
I wanted to put this here because there's a lot of conversation that's happening and sometimes folks get information from elsewhere. And I wanted you to hear where we are, what we're doing. Number one, also have the actual pass rate information. There's work to be done, but some of the information here we know is not accurate in what's out there. And so again, wanted you to know because there's lots of conversation going on.
Yeah, sorry, I just had one, it's more of a comment than a question. I apologize for taking that. So this, as I've said, in the commission to report by experts at BU and Milwaukee, who are pretty well known. One thing about that report that I think is important for the board to understand, and for the agency to understand, that we mentioned is on page 10 of the document, this document, where they are plotting the relationship between, you know, a reasonable measure of teacher effectiveness in terms of how much their students score and that, and teachers' scores on that praxis exam. And what that graph shows, if you go from those, it may not be immediately obvious to you, but the process says it should be, you get a pretty low score on that exam, you know, worse than those teachers, the pretty good scores, better than some teachers. Your students, on average, are just not doing that much better. They're not raising your student scores by that much more as you move from nearly the bottom to the top. So the gain from that shift, possible effect that teaching scores, something like a 30th of the difference for Black students and white students in this year. These tests, while they are somewhat predictive of how we measure, how they appear to be doing by these measurements, they're really, there's not that much action there. And I think that's important to keep in mind when we policy that there's just not that much predictive. I don't know if you disagree with that, but that's my.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I don't think the purpose of these tests were necessarily to predict that outcome per se, but to sort of have some baseline confidence, if you will, of content area knowledge, but not to necessarily predict the impact. The only other part I would add is that the effect of reading and math scores, right? They're looking primarily at smart balanced, and we provided the data to them, so we know what they're looking at. So it's reading and math scores. So it really then limits to very few sets of teachers that they are able to follow, and they're not able to gauge any of the other effects, if you will. So, I mean, I think I mean, that's kind of the thing that many of these types of policies struggle with. So I'm not disputing that by any stretch, but just saying that I think part of this assessment is if you have baseline content knowledge, this praxis where the cut score is, folks should be able to pass it, is kind of the point.
Yeah, I mean, so first off, I agree that other measures are relevant. What we have, it'd be interesting to see other things too. I would be more, I think you pointed, it seems like if you look at the questions, people should be able to answer them. That seems like a reasonable point to make. I would be more worried about this lower threshold if I saw, that people were sort of tapering down as they got towards the bottom of it's actually just not, it's not what you see. So while your points on, limited sample and the measurement are well taken, I don't see too much that concerned about those. But anyway, I appreciate the fact we measured it, sort of credit to you and your.
Well, I didn't institute this exam, it's been there for a while.
And, and that said, and our position here, and that's why if the legislation passes and there's a board, we continue to have further conversations about, should it be this? Should it be something else? Should it be options? This plus other options.
Right. I just wanted to make sure we got the board and the value for the consultants report there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And these are the conversations. As you mentioned, we literally have transcripts and information to look at, to kind of, look, peek that behind the curtain, for those who are passing, and what does that look like? And so we have to ask ourselves, right? Are we okay with a profile of a potential candidate who 20 years removed from school and not having done any really math or then speak on math, to be okay to be the teacher for our students, right? And without then having to do something further to get some content knowledge. I think that is the conversation. And so whatever that pathway is, to get there is what I'm saying. Let's look at all those pathways. What I'm still not willing to give up is no pathway at this point in time for us to at least know that, at an entry point, and also to keep in mind, and that's why I'm also so pleased, we're not doing these in isolation. The new teacher evaluation, guidelines and system is then to be able to help teachers grow, right? It's so that principal, whomever can say, all right, and these are areas of growth that you're working, so you'll come here and you can grow, right?
Well, yes, I view all these, but I know it's only that I view all these ones as being, it's moving, as adding flexibility to the system, not adversity.
Absolutely. And this is just for the board to know, because there's a lot of this conversation happening. And so you run into this outside of this space. We just wanted to make sure we got you the information that.
And Karen, I really appreciate this because especially these 3 items, I sat on the certification group. I'm guessing Laura will update us on what happens to House Bill 5436 as well as 80-something others that are out there next month. But it is out there, and there's a lot on the praxis, and having conversations with people who approach me about it, I realized they didn't really have a really clear indication of what a praxis test was. So I thought this was very important to put out there. I'm thrilled about looking at that pilot program this year and looking at those, the commissioner and I had discussed, Bridgeport, 100%. So Bridgeport is doing something that 100% of their candidates are passing. And so we now have to start looking at those that are, down in the 60%. There's something different there. And I like that idea that use those model programs, and we have 2 or 3. Eastern, the other one that is the 2 that are at 100%. And that's what we need to look at. They are preparing our teacher candidates at a very good rate, and we need to help the other step through it. So I think this information is so important that we hear, because it is out there and there's a lot of talk. And I completely agree with the commissioner that we can't just throw everything out without having something in place. So this House bill is going to be crucial for our next steps.
And I just to add too, I think what I'm also saying, I guess, is that it is not okay to not have an alternative like what we're trying to create here. I think I'm comfortable going there with the findings, if you will, to say like, we've gotta have alternatives. I mean, there are reasons why several states, including Connecticut, do not have a high school graduating exam, right? For our high school student. There's a reason for that, because you want to have some different ways of showing proficiency. But at the same time, we also hear that our students, some of our students, are not prepared for life after high school. And so, I mean, it's kind of that balance. How do you balance those things at a state level, at a policy level, while making these types of options available? So I think a lot more to come in this space.
So thank you all very much.
No.
No, I really just want to thank you and continue to do this work. This is a part of the comprehensive efforts that we're looking at in terms of diversifying our pipeline. Some of you may not know, I had Deputy Commissioner Sotomayor went out to talk to the students that were here when the first in public section said they're spending money to take these exams, because we put $2 million out there at our 18 higher ed institutions to help to cover and defray some of those costs. So when I heard that, I did a text her, go talk to those students to make sure that they can access those resources, because we recognize that that can also be a barrier to have to pay for these exams. And so that resource is still out there, and we want to make sure that it's used. So that is my report. And
We have nothing financial, correct? Oh, we have to do this. Okay. And G is sitting right there. Condition, let's see. I'll entertain a motion on the condition of education, Connecticut 2020. 22-23.
In between lunch. On us. I'm not going to go through every page of this report. I'll give you some high-level highlights. I mean, you all have received the report. Hopefully, you've had a chance to look at it. And I'm basically going through the executive summary, which is also the commissioner's memo, which is pretty much the same as what's the executive's summary of the report itself. The condition of education, we were supposed to come to you, I think, the prior month, but I think it got pushed back. So pretty much all the data that's in here is already public. We've already released on Ed site. So there's not new data really here. It's really more a summary of the data. This is a legislatively required summary report. We try to pull pretty much a lot of information that's already on Ed site and try to put it together. And we speak in those 4 buckets again: students, educators, instruction, and performance. Those are kind of the 4 instruction/resources and performance. So our student enrollment continues to increasingly be more diverse. We are more than 52% students of color as of last year. That's even increased this year. We are over 17% students with disabilities, and last year we were 9.7% English learners. This year we are over 10% English learners, so over 50,000. In fact, I was just looking at, as of October 23, and that's not exactly in this report, October 23, we had 54,000 English learners. And by the time we got to the Lost Links testing in January of this year, we had almost 57,000 English learners. So the numbers, English learners is perhaps our fastest growing group. And we've been looking at some of their test results too, and just sort of saying the profiles of that. I mean, we're digressing a little bit, but population is really changing. While after the pandemic, our enrollment has, there was a big drop in the pandemic year, October of 20, we had a drop, but then we've kind of stabilized to such an extent that had we had our sort of annual decline every year, we would be where we are today. So it's kind of like we've sort of stabilized over the last few years
enrollment is still at around I mean, this past year is around 512,000. Thank you, Commissioner. You got that memorized. But with those several thousand additional EL learners, we're already, different from where that is. Our educator workforce is becoming increasingly diverse as well. Not as fast as the student group, but definitely picking up steam here. We had last year over 6,000 educators in 22-23 of color, and in 23-24 over 6,300 educators of color. So that's as of October 23, over 6,300, 11.7%. And we even look at, I use educators of color as a way of sort of speaking about Black, Hispanic, Asian educators. But even when you look within each of those individual groups, you see increases within each of those groups. And more recently, we've also been looking at administrators versus teachers, general education teachers, special education teachers, and we see similar increases from over the last 5-6 years in terms of Black African-American education teachers in our classrooms and Hispanic Latino teachers in our classrooms, also showing increases in that. So that I know there are numerous efforts in that regard. Moving down to chronic absenteeism, you've heard our presentations on that. How with the pandemic, our rates more than doubled. They're still high, but this year, as of March, it's down to about 19%, 18.9%, still really high compared to where we were before the pandemic at 10%. So, but heading in the right direction. So that's, our work is making a difference. I think that's really what I want to raise and I've talked about all of these things at other times, but academic achievement, is mixed. There is slight, improvement in math and science, but ELA is kind of mixed, and we're not yet back to pre-pandemic levels. We're still below pre-pandemic levels. Our graduation rates, high school graduation rates, declined for the first time this past cohort to 88.9, and this was for the cohort of 2022. What that means is that the students should have graduated on time in 4 years by August of 22, and that rate for the first time was declined since we started measuring it and reporting it publicly 2010-11 formally. So since that time, and we know that the on track to 9th grade is lagging. It's a little over 80% when we were almost close to 90% prior to the pandemic. So kids are not on track in 9th grade. That's all part of the at-risk students when we get to the disengaged, disconnected youth discussion. So yeah, we know that's an issue, and that's something we're continuing to address. When we think of whether our high school students are ready for college and careers, we look at a few things. Are they meeting benchmark on exams like SAT, ACT? Are they passing an AP course? Doesn't matter what that is. It could be AP biology, physics, math, STEM type stuff, or it could be studio art, psychology, doesn't matter. Are they taking college level coursework and earning, or IB? And more recently, I know Cambridge is also increasing their presence. So that's something we'll be looking at in the future. And more recently in this measure, we also started looking at students earning college credit through our partners through higher ed, whether it be UConn's ECE program, CT State has a big presence, and several of our CSUs, and many of our private partners, private college partners, are doing a lot of work in this space. Collectively, what we see, a slight increase there, we see 44% of our 11th and 12th graders doing one of these things. They're passing an AP, they're passing an IB, they're earning 3 or more college credits. They're doing something, but still a long ways away from where we need to be. But, so again, that's some progress there. The area that another area where we have seen a decline is college enrollment, is post-secondary enrollment. For years, those rates were at 72%, 71%. With the pandemic, for the first time, we saw it drop to 66, and it's kind of hovered there. for the last couple of years. So class of 21 and class of 22, around 66%. And so college completion is also dropping slightly. So we're taking lots of proactive measures, FAFSA completion being a big part of it. PACT, free community college is huge in this space. Making those investments is key. And, just I think a couple of weeks ago, Secretary Cardona was in the state touting FAFSA completion and the importance of FAFSA completion. So we're going to be doing some more on that front. More marketing and awareness raising with communications department in that area. So the condition of it, I mean, I'm giving you a sampler of some of the indicators. There's a lot more in there. Take questions. And then in the rest of the executive summary, we just review some of our investments that we've made, especially in the recent years with our COVID dollars. Whether it be the model curricula that was mentioned previously, the Science of Reading Masterclass, our interim block assessments, on and on, LEAP, summer enrichment investments, and so on. I mean, there's so many, the behavioral health pilot, et cetera. And lastly, I'll say the condition of ed is not just me speaking up here when I'm speaking really on behalf of my entire office. From the people who collect data to the people who process and report everything and analyze it. I mean, there's so many smart people doing this work. And also all my colleagues in leadership, because all the initiatives are really, this is representative of the whole agency and all our work. So while I'm the messenger, I speak on behalf of all of my colleagues. So.
I appreciate, I know this is my go-to. For data, and keeps it on my desk. So I held it from coming last month because I know we had new board members, and it's kind of a nice way to onboarding. We didn't see it, we can think of anything that you can have, and so we can continue to look at this more closely, provide information to you on the issues around it. But the other thing we also talked about is not just what the data are showing us, but what we do so that we're data informed. And so the speed initiatives that's also aligned with what it is that we're doing. So when I see data that is not something that is a challenge, I think it's really do about it. The next question, and that's some of what you see there as well. So I do appreciate the performance office. We are doing a lot. I believe full transparency in your system, and so whatever the data show, we're not hiding it. It's out there because that's how we work together for improvements. And so I just a shout out to them. We were in a webinar together in another state, and I said, for Connecticut, dashboards are us. So there were many dashboards that's there, but it really is about transparency in the system. That would inform the work that we all do collectively, not just within the education system, but also systems that just a part of the larger ecosystem. So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments, and I thank you very much, and all the staff. You recognize that, and it's certainly a huge village that puts it all together. So thank you for bringing it. It is so important. It is our data go-to. Thank you.
Yeah, just
see, you haven't spoken, so now you're gonna get on the
an old physical educator. Old physical educator. You didn't mention it at all, but I noticed a significant drop in physical fitness.
Oh, physical, yeah.
Yeah, and I know you probably can't answer that today, but something that's in my mind.
No, I mean,
a healthy, bright student is going to be a better student.
Oh, couldn't agree more. As a fitness buff myself, and I know John is here too, who works on this area too, is the area that we see the biggest decline with the pandemic is actually aerobic capacity, because there are 4 parts, as you well know, in this assessment, and aerobic capacity is one of those areas that we used to see declines even in a cohort basis from 4th grade to 8th grade over that 4-year span. But with the pandemic, that's really been accentuated. So a lot of this is being driven by that area more than any other area. So yeah, I mean,
I was just going to say, in physical fitness, a big thing that we talk about here, I know John Petronelli is here, and we have initiatives in that space. Really want to make sure, because the other thing we see is obesity, right? And that growing as well. And we know the impact, the tremendous negative health impacts that comes along with that. So when we talk about a student, we're talking about physical health, which is why I'm so glad Dr. Salazar is now a member of this board. Physical health, mental health, right, behavioral health, it's all a part of what it is that we're paying attention to. So that really is important. So thank you, Mr. Harris, for bringing that out.
Yeah, I noticed, so obviously with the college enrollment rates dropping, is that sort of concurrent with like trade school or other things increasing, or are those remaining flat? And so in general, just post-secondary is declining? Because I noticed it was very specifically college.
Yeah, so college includes 2 or 4-year college, and it includes career-oriented pathways at college too. What it does not include is very short-term training programs at a college, like 2-month programs, 1-month program. Those types of things won't be in here as is if they go directly into the workplace. That obviously doesn't get captured. So we know from earnings data that some post-secondary credential is essential. So not touching post-secondary kind of is not ideal, especially when our community colleges are free in the state. And you just have to do the FAFSA, obviously, but the community colleges are free and these options are available. So, I mean, the dual credit work that we're doing is, again, cluing folks in while you're in high school, then FAFSA. I mean, it's all tied in. I mean, FAFSA completions are down nationally and as they are in Connecticut. So that's something where, like this year with the better FAFSA work, as it gears up, it takes time, right? So those rates are down. So we're pushing on that too. No, thank you.
You're voting on the receipt of the condition of education in Connecticut 22-23. All in favor? All right. Opposed? Thanks again. We do have an item on the consent agenda that is going to be removed. So we can entertain a motion on the request for finance advisory committees. Is here. With me. Yeah. And Mr. Harris, I will hand it over to you, unless you'd like to implement.
No, I just had I saw the subject of the request from the Finance Advisory Committee, which I'm not sure what committee that is. But as the chair of the finance audit, you know, I'm just wondering what this is, and maybe I should just let you report first.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, the Finance Advisory Committee is comprised of Governor's Office, OPM, and various other heads of state agencies.
So that's where the committee is, so it has nothing to do with us.
No, it does not have anything to do with us. We need to seek permission to transfer funds between appropriation when it exceeds a certain value. So in this case, it exceeds 175,000.
So based on the timing and that in the report, so normally in order to do that, to go to that committee, we need the board's approval to do it. So that's why it's coming to you. You don't see it all the time. So to go from here to the FAC, again, as mentioned, it's a body, you know, that does this. The state agency moving funds, bringing funds around.
That I understand. So it did not have to come through the finance audit.
But that's correct. So we just need the board approval. Your approval, then we can officially go forward and ask for that authority.
So thank you, because when I was asked, I also could not answer it. So thank you very much for that. So the vote on the table is the request for the Finance Advisory Committee action. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to committee reports, academic standards and assessment.
Hello again.
That chair.
I am not sure where we are, quite frankly.
I do believe you had, the one just came out recently, June 11th.
Okay, I know we just had one that was canceled.
Right.
So I will say with a caveat that we have a meeting June 11th.
Yes.
So.
And I should say for our newer board members, I think Dr. Salazar is aware of, as Dr. Zimmerman has been participating. You can come to any of these committee meetings and the official, so we're going to be doing official placement on committee, but we do have some committees that have to be filled, and I'm assuming our board members coming back, return to where they were, but that will be coming. But everyone is welcome to this. I'll give you a good shot.
I guess you are absolutely correct. 30 in this building. The academic standards assessment committee. Probably the minus committee. Thank you.
Accountability and support. We met, as you've heard, briefly earlier last month, and the schools that came in front of us were came from the full board today, is what you saw. We do have a meeting. Our last one for the school year, per se, is May 15th at 3:30. It's been extended. It's usually an hour. It will be 3:30 to 5. We do have 3 districts coming in front of us, so that is pretty extensive meeting. And again, all are well. I'm assuming finances.
Finance, audit, and budget committee will meet on June the 4th at 10 o'clock. Right here. June 1.
No update on legislation policy at this time. I do have, Pat had to leave earlier. She did lead with me on the Connecticut technical report. There was a Schools USA competition held on March 22nd. 77 CTED students qualified for 2 national competitions to be held in Atlanta this summer. These kids always do such great things. Credentials, 11,781 various credentials have been earned so far this year, ranging across all trades. And under the work-based learning, 1,074 juniors and seniors are currently out on work-based learning. And their chronic absenteeism, as she's reported, because Pat has reported in the past, was at 21.9% in the past. This school year, they set a goal for 16.9%, and they are currently at 16%. So kudos to them for reaching their goal and working on it so hard. NASB. There are a few things coming up at NASB. First of all, and I'll have this sent out to you. I think if you've been getting the emails for NASB, hopefully you have. Your emails have been triggered, but they do have an office hour, and these are open to all board members and staff, actually. They have a very good one coming up next Monday, May 6th. It's on AI in education. And the one who is running it is who I was able to see at the national convention, excellent presentation of how AI is in education. So if you can participate, you are welcome to do so. And it usually is also taped. And so if you're not, I'll make sure that it goes out. But the presentation that he did to us was just absolutely fabulous. And it gave you a very different look at AI in education. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. As I said earlier, there is a new member conference that is opened to our brand new board members. And you'll get some more information about that. That will be taking place in DC on July 9th and 10th. And it's back in person for the first time in many years. So that's great to see. They're very excited about that. So I'm hoping some of our newer board members will be able to attend. And then finally is the CERC, which you have in front of you. You have 2 things in front of you. You have the invitation that you've received already for the dismantling racism, which is also taking place next Monday. A great conference. I know some board members have attended. I have the pleasure of doing so, and I will be there on Monday to attend. But if that is of interest and you haven't let all of know, please do.
And then I just want to just bring one thing to your attention because it was something that came up at our board meeting. It is on in your report from CERC. Their podcast. And it fits so good into what we just discussed today. They have 2 of them, and I would really encourage you to go on because they are just excellent. The first one that they did was learning with multilingual students. We heard from Ajit on how our population has increased greatly. And these are actually bilingual students who are speaking about what they go through and what's hard for them, what they wish their teachers knew about them. It is very well done and voices of our students. And then the second one, A Walk in My Shoes, personally is something I wish I had listened to years and years ago as a parent. This is students talking about their IEPs and what it means to have an IEP. And so we heard so much about this, and it is the most heartwarming to listen to them of the importance of an IEP and how important it is to them and how important they feel and all those things that come with having a special student. It is they're so well done. So I just encourage you. I just wanted to put they're there in the report. Motion to adjourn. I'm just waiting.
We'll see you again.
Christmas Day.